A violent storm batters the Grand Samayan estate, which is swallowed by the torrential downpour. Inside, a darkened room, a single newborn lies in his crib, the lone light coming from a rain-streaked window. A grim, blonde-haired man stalks toward the cradle, casting a massive shadow over the infant. The baby head shaved and wrapped tightly sleeps on, completely oblivious. This man, my father, stares down at the newborn and declares him utterly disgusting. My whole life's misfortune, you see, boiled down to being born at the exact same moment as another kid. That other child was Kajin, blessed by the sword god Kushan himself, gifted a flawless body and insane talent. Miles away, my exhausted mother clutches me, her unblessed baby. On a threadbare bed, her eyes filled with nothing but sorrow. All she could think was how she wished I had been Kajin instead. It wasn't until later that I understood. My parents' crushing disappointment stemmed from the fact that I was born missing my right arm. Every single night, my mother would hold me and whisper. In the pitch black, she would look at my smiling face and ask with chilling calm, "Can you not just die for me, my baby?" Even as an infant, I was aware, and I'd think, "Sorry, Mom, but I refuse to die." I remembered hearing my father's voice, before I was even born, his words dripping with insane expectations. He once told my pregnant mother that their unborn child was the family's one true hope. Seething with a bitter rivalry, my father swore that his son would eclipse his older brother's prodigy, Kajin. My father dreamed I would be the one to finally defeat Kajin. What he got was a one-armed, godless failure. Years drift by, and on a perfect spring day, kids and maids are lounging in the estate's vibrant gardens. The maids are absolutely fawning over young Master Kajin as he wobbles toward them. Kajin flashes a smile so bright the servants practically call it a gift from the heavens. Watching from behind a tree, my mother sees the whole picture-perfect scene. Her voice is laced with venom as she notes that Kajin is already walking. Then she glances at me bawling on the grass, wondering why I was so damn pathetic. Ages later, when I finally scraped myself up and managed to take my first steps, I remember the insane effort it took. But by then, my mother, drunk and lost in despair, was just sobbing that Kajin was already swinging a sword, making my tiny achievement feel like absolutely nothing. The day I first picked up a crudely made wooden sword, Kajin was already sensing mana and mastering the legendary Samayan sword techniques. I can still hear my mother's sigh, her constant wish that I had been Kajin. Over the years, that envy she planted in me grew into a twisted admiration for him. Then came winter. A carriage cut through a raging blizzard, sealing my fate. At just 7 years old, I was shipped off to become one of Kajin's personal attendants. To the public, the family spun a different story, claiming I was sent to be a supportive cousin, a companion for the great Kajin. The truth, my parents cashed me in for 300,000 linden. Fast forward a few years. I'm a wreck, battered, bloody, and gasping for breath while tied to a post in the dead of winter. A teenage Kajin stands over me, laughing his head off at the pathetic sight. With a sick grin, he gets ready to crack his whip, calling me a loser, the likes of which the world has never seen. The whip smashes against my body with explosive force. You see, Kajin always despised me, and I became his favorite punching bag whenever he was pissed off. I forced myself not to scream, but it wasn't because of the pain. What ripped me apart was seeing the knights nearby just smirking and looking the other way. The truly soul-crushing part was this. Every single adult there pretended not to see a thing. Kajin just keeps whipping me while high-ranking family members watch and do absolutely nothing. As far as I was concerned, there wasn't a single real adult in that entire place. The wind howled through the snowy mountains, a perfect match for how alone I felt. I remembered hearing stories that my famous uncle had abandoned the family ages ago and never looked back. With no one to keep him in check, Kajin molded himself into a sadistic executioner during training spars. Kajin's speed is just unreal, overwhelming another trainee who can barely even get his sword up to block. Kajin just yawns, saying the drills are a joke, and everyone else is just painfully slow as he shatters their defenses. Wooden swords explode into splinters from the sheer force of his blows. One guy just immediately taps out Kajin's blade already pressed against his throat. The thing is, Kajin's God-given talent wasn't a gift. It was a poison that rotted him from the inside out. Kajin just savagely keeps wailing on. The dude who already surrendered like the rules mean nothing to him. He arrogantly demands the next victim step up, and that's my cue. Now, older, scarred, and with only one arm, I'm shoved forward to face him. I grip my own training sword, admitting to myself that I'm jealous, so jealous of the power he was just handed. I scream, roaring that I want that strength too, and charge with everything I have. Our wooden blades collide in a violent crash, red mana erupting around me. Kajin freezes when he sees the look in my eyes, and he screams at me to stop looking at him like that, before unleashing a devastating wave of mana. "I hate you," he roars. Next thing I know, I'm a bloody heap against a demolished pillar, while Kajin sneers at the idea of a one-armed nobody daring to glare at him. He kicks me, beats me, taunting me that no amount of hard work will ever close the gap between us. He spits that no matter how much I grind, I will never, ever be on his level. Crumpled and broken on the ground, I whisper it through the blood, I still want to win. With my eyes burning with defiance, I say it again, I really, really want to win. Deep down, I knew my dreams couldn't be reached by effort alone as I trained like a madman in the woods. Even when Kajin squandered his genius on cheap thrills and vice, Davin could never seem to catch up. In every brutal life-or-death clash, Kajin consistently and utterly dominated him. Davin saw it clearly, a slacker prodigy versus a try-hard nobody. But he clung to the hope that one day their roles would flip, and so he never stopped fighting. Years flash forward. A massive arena is packed to the rafters. The crowd's roar is deafening as the two cousins face off in a public duel. Down on the sand, Kajin in his shining armor trades thunderous blows with the cloaked Davin. Kajin launches himself into a devastating dive, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. Davin shoves back dark mana, crackling around him as he strains against the onslaught, his own eyes burning a fierce purple. Pushing his demonic power to its absolute limit, he unleashes a hellish downward slash that erupts in a storm of corrupted energy. The shockwave is so immense, Kajin is forced to shield himself, cursing at its raw power, as the blinding blast whites out his vision. In that instant, a shadow falls over him. Davin descends from above like a dark comet, his face a terrifying mask of rage. He raises his blade for the finishing blow. The two warriors collide one last time, and an explosion of lightning-like energy rips through the air between them. Someone screams Kajin's name right as a colossal purple detonation rocks the arena, shaking the stands to their very foundation. The entire stadium is stunned into silence. One spectator in particular is just frozen, completely speechless at the scene. Then, a collective gasp ripples through the crowd as they realize the one-armed Davin has actually defeated the legendary Storm Sword Kajin. Davin, barely able to stand, thinks to himself that, until this day, he'd fought Kajin in 21 official duels and lost every single one. At 29 years old, he had finally taken down his lifelong rival. He remembered the countless unofficial beatdowns, the endless scorn from everyone who branded him a hopeless, talentless fool, no matter how hard he tried. But he declares that today he was the one left standing. The stadium erupts, chanting Davin's name, as he holds his broken opponent at the point of his sword. Davin glares down at his cousin. How long did you really think you could stay on top? Kajin, a sweaty, hysterical mess on the ground, just screams back, I can't lose to a failure like you, it's impossible. Davin's mind flashes back to a lifetime of insults. He can still hear his mother whispering how much easier life would be if he'd just been Kajin. He remembers his father openly wishing that Kajin was his son instead. And he can hear Kajin sneering that if their places were switched, he would never have lived such a pathetic life. His cousin curses him with furious frustration. Davin calmly replies that if their places were switched, he would have avoided drowning in vice. And he would have used that God-given talent to lift up the weak, instead of crushing them under his boot, before turning his back on the kneeling Kajin. For a brief moment, Davin savors the feeling of final victory. He starts to think it's all over, but a primal scream of danger erupts in his gut. Treachery. Kajin stabs him from behind, driving a blade clean through his chest. The crowd's cheers morph into screams of pure horror at the sudden betrayal. He stabbed him in the back, the crowd shrieks. As blood pours from his lips, Davin bitterly chokes out, "You slimy snake." Even now, Kajin trembles with a pathetic mix of rage and desperation clutching the weapon. All Davin feels is a searing, white-hot pain. He knows instantly the wound is fatal. Despite his victory, he recognizes the blade Sunday. It's the holy sword of the Samyeon family pulsating with anti-demon mana. For him, there's no surviving this. Not unless the miracle saint herself intervened. With a bloody grin, he tells Kajin that history will now remember him as the true loser. Davin awakens in a torch-lit dungeon corridor. He's bound to a chair, the gaping wound still fresh as he sits cloaked inside a prison cell. Groggily, he wonders if this is hell. A hulking executioner-like jailer emerges from the shadows and ominously repeats the word back to him. The masked man tells Davin he got lucky because the renowned miracle saint, a woman named Rayla, just happened to be watching the duel. Hearing that name, Davin's eyes widen as he asks about the saint. The jailer sneers that, like a true holy woman, she miraculously healed Davin's filthy, dying body. Davin questions if that's really why he survived, even though his entire body feels like a broken puppet whose strings have been cut. The masked interrogator suddenly leans in close. "Did you make a contract with the devil?" Davin, completely bewildered, just asks what he's talking about. The man insists that the only way a loser like Davin could have ever beaten the great Kajin was by making a deal with demonic forces. Then comes the final soul-crushing blow. He adds that Davin's own parents have already confessed to this accusation, leaving Davin utterly shattered. Davin pictures his parents, realizing they've sold him out once again. A bitter laugh escapes his lips as he asks if this is for real. The interrogator lays out the fabricated evidence, ritual items, and Davin's blood found at his home, and an insane accusation that he sacrificed 300 children for power. He proclaims that Kajin only stabbed Davin to defend the Samyeon family's honor, painting the coward as some kind of tragic hero. Forced to wound his own cousin, it all clicked. Davin understood that while he might have beaten Kajin in a fair fight, the Samyeon family itself had chosen its golden boy over him. The official sentence is read out loud. Davin will have all of his mana sealed away, destined to spend the rest of his days imprisoned. The man tells him he'll suffer forever and rot away in this prison. Davin narrates that they severed his tendons and sealed his mana completely. Bound by multiple glowing chains, he's dragged down the prison hallway and thrown into a cell like a piece of trash. Broken and dressed in striped prison clothes, he just sits alone on the cold, unforgiving stone. Time crawls by in a crushing silence that surrounds his bowed head. Then one day, a shadow falls across his cell. It's Kajin himself, and a cold flicker of recognition sparks in Davin's eyes. A cruel smirk twists Kajin's lips as he says this pathetic state suits Davin perfectly. He gloats about how the world now worships him as a legendary sword emperor, a celebrated genius of hard work. Leaning in close, Kajin's voice drops to a venomous whisper, thanking Davin for being the perfect stepping stone, the loser, whose failure paved his way to glory. And with that, he vanishes. After that visit, Davin's already pathetic food portions are slashed to nearly nothing. Years blur together, carving him into a skeletal figure with wild, overgrown hair. He lies, sprawled on the filthy floor, tormented by a hunger so vicious it feels alive. In a final act of desperation, he sinks his teeth into his own arm, anything to fight off the gnawing emptiness. Staring at the bloody crescent mark on his skin, a grim realization sets in, if he's going to die anyway. He wants to go out with some scrap of honor. He curses himself, wishing he had just died in the arena all those years ago, in the very moment he had actually defeated Kajin. His body finally gives out, collapsing onto the freezing stone. A deep, numbing cold seeps into his bones as death closes in, and his mind begins to drift. What if his life had been different? What if he hadn't been born with only one arm? He pictures another life, one where he was born into the main Samyeon bloodline, praised by all. He imagines receiving the sword god's blessing, his parents looking on with proud smiles. In this dying vision, he sees himself finally being loved, held in his mother's embrace. But fighting through the despair, one thought screams above the rest: he doesn't want to die. He clings to that single powerful desire: he still wants to live. Then, in the suffocating darkness, a single drop falls. The sound sends out ripples like the start of something new. A pinprick of light ignites in the void and begins to swell. A sinister voice echoes in his mind, declaring that he will not die. But that thought is instantly shattered by an angry shout demanding to know if he's even listening. While a family elder is speaking, another voice screams the name Vinchen as a hand viciously seizes a child's sleeve. In that instant, Davin realizes he has awakened in a totally different time, a different body. A sharp, searing pain jolts him, and he realizes it's coming from his right arm. He wonders if this insane scene with some furious blonde man gripping him is just a hyper-realistic dream. He recognizes the man, an adult from the clan. But he's from a branch family, so how would he know him? Then he hears the name again, Vinchen, seventh son of Aiden Kaga. A chaotic flood of alien memories crashes into his consciousness. Still, he thinks when you compare it to that underground hellhole, this dreamlike place with fresh air really isn't so bad. He figures this must be some kind of gift from the gods before death, a dream, where he has his right arm back. Just then, the enraged blonde man gets right in his face and starts screaming. The man channels a current of energy through his grip, and the boy instantly recognizes it as a mana-based pain attack. Dark blue energy crackles around them. Instinct takes over. Davin remembers exactly how to block this kind of assault and snatches the man's arm, preparing the counter. With a forceful push, he breaks the physical contact. He's shocked, though, when a relatively light shove sends the man flying backward. That's weird. The guy has decent mana control, but his body moves in slow motion. Playing dumb, Davin offers an awkward apology, pretending it was a complete accident. He stands over the crumpled man and casually claims his hand slipped. Utterly humiliated, the man scrambles to his feet, calling him an impudent brat. He clutches his chest, snarling that the boy is only acting arrogant because he's from the main family. The man vows that his own son will absolutely crush Vinchen in the upcoming clash between the main and branch families. This guy feels eerily familiar, just like his past father, who was obsessed with taking down the eldest uncle. He remembers how, when that ambition became impossible, his father projected all that frustrated rage onto him, branding him an ungrateful son. With a final glare, the branch family man storms off. He spits a promise not to forget Vinchen's arrogance, and warns him to just wait for the assembly of true swords. Left alone in the massive ornate room, Vinchen stands motionless, his thoughts racing as he scans his luxurious new bedroom. He finally lets out a sigh of relief. He walks to the window, calming his nerves, and a chilling doubt begins to creep in. This doesn't feel like a dream at all. It's gone on too long. He should have woken up by now. A sharp jab of pain in his head triggers another wave of memories. He sees his mother dying, just moments after giving birth to him. He remembers a father who completely neglected him, and he recalls the other children, who used him as their personal scapegoat and punching bag. He finally understands. He is Vinchen, the seventh of 8 children, in a famous family of swordmasters, the Adenka clan. He remembers cowering after being struck by his youngest sibling Lola. It becomes clear that in this powerful main family, he was the ugly duckling abandoned by his own relatives and preyed upon by every ambitious branch family member. He concludes that Davin of the Samyeon family has been reincarnated into the body of the useless Vinchen of the Adenka family. His head is still spinning. He has to admit he doesn't really have a clue what is going on. Searching the room, his eyes land on a personal diary on one of the shelves. Flipping through it, he learns that the original Vinchen was jealous of his siblings and suffered relentless harassment from his branch family relatives. He was completely ignored by the servants and had even written about wanting to die. The entire diary is a testament to his self-loathing. Vinchen had fallen into total despair. Then it all clicks. His reincarnation was the answer to 2 different prayers, Davin's desperate plea to live and Vinchen's tragic wish to die. He muses that, while he wanted to live more than anything, Vinchen wanted to die. He wonders if their 2 opposing desires caused one soul to disappear and the other to be reborn in its place. But even as the thought forms, he has to ask himself if he should actually believe such an absurd story. A sudden presence, a disembodied voice. He whips his head around, demanding to know who else is in the room. A mocking tone replies, calling him hopelessly naive. A demon, he wonders, trying to mess with his head about this messed-up reincarnation. But the voice shatters that theory, claiming to be the body's original owner, Vincent. The shock hits him like a physical blow. He realizes he's talking to Vincent himself. A ghostly figure surrounded by a swirl of butterflies confirms it. That was his name once. But he gave up that body. He no longer has a name. The spirit requests a new one from now on. Call him Julian. Davin demands to know how Julian, a dead kid, can be standing here. Julian's answer is chilling. What you are witnessing is a divine revelation. Davin's mind flashes back to what he knows of revelations, sacred messages bestowed by the gods upon a chosen few. The implications send a shiver down his spine. If this is real, he has to ask, are you a god? Julian confirms it with a smirk. Yeah, but just a minor one, don't get your hopes up. Julian explains that he was trying to summon a spirit god, but Davin's soul answered the call instead. To become a full-fledged god, he has to rack up a ton of achievements. He calls this grind his calling, the one path that will let him ascend to true godhood. Davin cuts him off. He might get the gist of Julian's situation, but frankly, he couldn't care less about some god's personal quest. He declares that if he really got a second chance at life, he's going to live it to the absolute fullest, not waste it, fulfilling some ghost's bucket list. Julian concedes that their clashing desires are exactly what landed them in this mess. Then Julian drops a bombshell warning that his spiritual energy is running on fumes. When it finally vanishes, the body Davin is borrowing will die right along with it. Davin laughs it off. A pathetic threat. He checks himself over, noting that this body feels way too solid and healthy to just keel over. But then a cold dread washes over him as he realizes something is terribly wrong with his condition. He snarls a curse at Julian, who lets him collapse onto the floor in a heap, just to prove how fragile the body truly is. As Davin crumples, Julian looks down on him. So naive. Now Julian announces, I'll show you the real memories. The butterflies around him begin to glow, swarming as he promises these memories are the 100% unfiltered truth. A blinding cascade of light slams into Davin's body and the memory transfer kicks into high gear. Writhing on the ground as the images assault his mind, Davin chokes out, what is this? He's slammed with flashes of horrific abuse. Voices scream trash and moron as he relives being mercilessly beaten, stomped on by a crowd of faceless figures. But onlookers in the memory notice something strange. Even while being brutalized, the look in his eyes is unnervingly different. The truth becomes brutally clear. Vincent never gave in to despair. He was just acting the part of a coward. The whole time he was secretly plotting his revenge. Davin reels from the revelation. This level of ruthless, cold-blooded scheming. From a 13-year-old. What kind of insane world was I reborn into? Julian's smug voice cuts through the chaos. So, was my performance convincing enough for you? He explains that he had to play the victim to stay off the family's radar, while he secretly researched forbidden apostle-level power. So Julian asks, are you willing to hear my proposal now? He promises that their cooperation will benefit Davin too. Defeated, Davin agrees to listen. Julian starts with a loaded question. Have you ever heard of the archdemon Davin and the hero King Kajin? The names hit Davin like a lightning bolt. His own infamous title, and the name of his greatest rival. He can't believe he just heard them in the same sentence. Julian says he's talking about a story from 500 years ago. He speaks of how the one-armed swordsman Davin busted out of a Samyang prison. He allegedly cut a bloody path through the guards using a demonic pact, devouring countless souls and slaughtering tens of thousands. And that's how he was branded in the history books, Davin the Great Demon. The title echoes in Davin's mind, the Great Demon from 500 years ago. Stunned, he wonders if he's somehow time-traveled 500 years into the future. It seems utterly impossible. Julian points out how crazy it is that two people named Davin and Kajin just happen to share the Samyang bloodline now. No, Davin insists. I remember it perfectly. I died in that prison cell 500 years ago. Julian continues the official storytelling of how the Samyang family cast aside the disgraced one-armed swordsman in favor of the legendary Storm Sword. He says the one-armed man died alone and forgotten. Meanwhile, the Storm Sword ascended to glory, becoming the revered Sword Emperor. Davin is seething. The Samyang clan twisted history, inventing a whole fairy tale about a great demon and a hero king. Roaring with fury, he slams his fist into the floor, cursing the entire Samyang family. Julian adds, with a sickeningly cheerful tone, that the hero King Kajin actually cared for Davin deeply, describing their bond as romantic. Stop spouting that garbage, Davin explodes. When Julian asks why he's so triggered, Davin snaps back, because that whole story is a complete fabrication. Julian looks genuinely surprised. Wait, are you actually from that era? Davin confirms it, grumbling at being called an old man. Julian just remarks that history is written by the victors, and jokes about how sharp this 13-year-old sounds. Davin retorts that kids these days mature way faster than back in Julian's time. With a sigh, he tells Julian to just get on with it. Julian continues, saying the hero king joined forces with the Sun Sword Emperor, his best friend, to take down the supposed great demon. Davin immediately presses him, and just who is this Sun Sword Emperor? Julian reveals his name is Arslan, the very ancestor of the Adenka family. As the name clicks, Davin erupts in laughter. The snot-nosed kid he once knew actually founded the entire Adenka clan. A memory flashes through his mind of a young Arslan, eyes sparkling as he introduced himself, gushing about how much he looked up to Davin. Another memory follows Arslan, full of conviction, saying he wanted to be a hero just like Davin. Davin reminisces that, despite Arslan's age, he saw him as both a comrade and a student. He pictures Arslan visiting him in that cold prison, fiercely arguing that no amount of power could ever bury the truth. Arslan had made a solemn vow to restore Davin's honor, no matter how many years it took. But Davin bitterly recalls that after making that grand promise, Arslan never showed his face again. Julian continues explaining that Arslan, as Adenka's founding patriarch, burdened his descendants with a lifelong quest that's intrinsically linked to Julian's own divine purpose. With a sly grin, Julian reveals that mission to utterly crush the Samyan family. Davin adds that it's also about dragging the truth of the past into the light. He instantly connects this mission to Arslan's old promise, to expose the conspiracy that framed him. Certain this can't be a simple coincidence, Davin decides that even if he doesn't have the full picture, the connection is undeniable. Julian lays it all out. Arslan abandoned the Falcon family, forged the Adenka clan from scratch, and dedicated its entire existence to uncovering that hidden truth. It dawns on Davin Adenka was created specifically to vindicate him, and he can't help but think it's pure destiny that he was reborn into this very family. He pieces it together. Julian's calling is to fulfill Adenka's legacy, and he asks if achieving that goal would truly elevate Julian to godhood. Julian counters with a business-like proposal, a deal that benefits them both. He claims that if the mission succeeds, Davin will gain full control of the body and even receive a divine blessing. Completely brushing off the sales pitch, Davin instead offers a quiet word of thanks to Arslan. He grips the sword hanging on his wall, and as he unsheathes it, a brilliant wave of mana erupts. He declares that he will carry on Arslan's mission and bring the Samyan family to their knees. He vows to rise above the clan that cast him aside, by flourishing within this new one. With their pact sealed, Davin and Julian stride out of the building. As they walk, Julian asks where he's off to in such a hurry. Annoyed, Davin snaps back, telling him to drop the whole old man shtick. Julian just smirks, retorting that anyone from 500 years ago is basically a fossil, which only irritates Davin more. Davin leans into the joke with dripping sarcasm, blaming his failing memory on old age, and pretending he's already forgotten Julian's divine mission, which makes Julian yell out his name in frustration. Amused, Davin finally agrees to be called Davin, an offer Julian jumps at. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the air, announcing the start of sparring practice, and the sharp clang of steel on steel catches them both by surprise. Outside, Davin watches armored soldiers training and finds himself wondering how the martial arts of this era even work and how much they've evolved over 500 years. A confident smirk spreads across his face as he anticipates testing the might of Kajin's descendants in the modern Samyan family. But in the next instant, his body becomes unbelievably heavy. He stumbles, a cold dread washing over him as he realizes something is terribly wrong. A sickening thud echoes as he collapses. As he meditates, forcing mana through his system, he discovers this body is so frail that only by constantly circulating mana can he even move normally. But while doing so, he detects a strange, almost miraculous mana flow deep within him. Alarmed, he desperately screams for Julian. Julian materializes in his pajamas, yawning and casually asking what the big emergency is. Davin grabs him, his voice intense, demanding to know why Julian never once trained with a sword. Julian timidly explains that he couldn't learn because of a congenital defect. Davin presses him, wanting to know the real reason, but all Julian can say is that he was just born that way. Davin explodes, shouting that Julian actually possesses the legendary heavenly exoskeleton and should have been a swordmaster. When a baffled Julian asks what he's even talking about, Davin breaks it down. It's a constitution that lets him store mana all over his body, primarily inside his bones. Julian repeats the words, his voice filled with disbelief. I can store mana in my bones. Frustrated, Davin decides to start from square one, explaining that martial artists use mana to achieve superhuman feats of strength. He sketches out the basics for a normal person. Mana is stored exclusively in the heart. He clarifies that people with a heavenly exoskeleton, however, can also stockpile mana in their bones, giving them a practically infinite energy supply. Julian is stunned to learn he's been walking around with this insane power-up his whole life, but Davin insists. He doesn't even comprehend how big of a deal this is. Davin then drops a bombshell. Kajin, the celebrated hero king himself, also had the heavenly exoskeleton. The dark irony hits him. He's been reincarnated with the exact same physical gift as Kajin, the very man he was jealous of his entire life. He has to admit the world 500 years later is way crazier than he could have ever imagined. The spirit complains that he's unable to connect his imagery to his heart. Baffled, Vincian asks what imagery even is. The spirit lets out a groan, realizing just how much he has to teach this kid. He defines imagery as a mental storage unit, created to hold mana. Vincian is totally floored learning that mana isn't stored in the heart at all, and asks how meditation is supposed to work then. Now the spirit is the one who's confused, asking which specific meditation technique Vincian is even talking about. Vincian's mind flashes to a legendary ancestor, a man named Falco. So who in their right mind was using a mana meditation technique centered on the times, heart times? The spirit reveals that back in his day, mages stored their power in imagery. Each one of these reservoirs was called a star, and your star count was basically your power level, a direct measure of a warrior's might. He drops another bombshell. Storing mana directly in the body was a forgotten art, a dangerous practice intentionally scrubbed from the history books, leaving Vincent absolutely reeling. The gears in Vincent's head start turning. He connects the dots. Adults in his family always form at least one imagery, so linking that to sensing mana must be what it means to be a one-star warrior. He comes to a chilling conclusion. The entire imagery system was invented to sidestep the catastrophic dangers of keeping raw mana in your heart. Vincent flashes back to the grim tales of countless martial artists who died when the power contained in their hearts literally erupted. But even knowing that he starts yanking raw mana directly into his own heart, the spirit completely freaks out, screaming, asking if Vincent is actively trying to channel power into his core. Vincent, however, has unshakable faith in his ridiculously strong heart. He fires back that real warriors have to embrace these kinds of insane risks. He even flexes that a legendary hero, the one-armed Davin, forged his power the exact same way. But the spirit just unloads on him, scolding him for letting the mana surge so chaotically. He demands to know if Vincent even knows the proper formula for a mana circuit. Vincent, clearly irritated, scoffs, asking if there's even a formula for something like mana flow. The spirit practically shrieks that, of course there is, and that power has to be wielded with maximum efficiency. Vincent just shrugs, saying he always guided mana purely on instinct, while admitting some people just couldn't handle it. He recalls that about 50% of those practitioners ended up with their magic circuits twisting into knots and exploding. The spirit grasps the horror of the situation that half of them died, while Vincent casually remarks that it also means half of them lived. The spirit pleads with him not to be so reckless with a body that isn't his own, begging him to treat it like something precious. And while Vincent lazily agrees, he hits back with a sharp, pointed question. If this body was so precious, why was it left to wither away in such a neglected and weakened state? The spirit is completely blindsided by the accusation. Vincent notes, the kid has an amazing physique, a powerful heart and solid circuits, claiming that with proper Samian training he would have been a massive success. The spirit tries to explain that while the physiognomy, the body's structure for holding mana, is perfect, it's been starved of any energy for 13 long years. Vincent puts it all together and reaches a grim diagnosis. At this rate, the original Vincent's body will give out before he even reaches adulthood. As night descends on the mansion, that heavy, dark realization just hangs in the air. The spirit offers a sliver of hope. Meditation could slow the decay, but it would only buy him about 10 more years. Vincent thinks to himself that 10 years is more than enough time to rocket past his old title of Storm Sword and make the legend of one-armed Davin a forgotten footnote in history. But then he remembers those same 10 years, the exact amount of time Davin spent starving to death in a prison cell, desperately clinging to life. Recalling that nightmare, he physically shudders, remembering just how terrifyingly long a decade can feel. Suddenly a fist hammers on the door, a voice demanding to know what the young lord is up to. Vincent is ripped from his meditation, calling out to see who's there. The servant, a man named Wilson, just storms right in announcing himself. Wilson's jaw drops at the sight of the wrecked room, and he demands to know why Vincent trashed the place. Vincent rises slowly to his feet and asks if Wilson is his personal attendant. Wilson confirms it, and Vincent remembers this is the exact same guy, the spirit Julian had once threatened to kill, in 3 years. Vincent decides to cut through the noise and just act. He orders Wilson to fetch him a fresh set of clothes, and to get the room cleaned up. Wilson, totally thrown off by Vincent's sudden commanding presence, wonders if this is the same pathetic kid he's always known. He nervously blurts out, asking what kind of messed up experiment caused all this destruction. Vincent just casually denies doing anything out of the ordinary, but Wilson accuses him of going crazy from loneliness and dabbling in dark magic, threatening to report him to the heads of the household. Vincent lets out a dark laugh, noting how Wilson speaks with formal words, while being unbelievably disrespectful. He lays into Wilson for defying his master and straight up ignoring a direct command. Vincent's voice drops to an icy tone as he points out that cleaning and serving are literally Wilson's job, even if it's a bit more work today. Wilson actually protests, whining that he hates doing tasks he's not in the mood for and complaining about being treated like a janitor. Vincent's eyes narrow as he bluntly reminds him that he times is in fact, a servant. He then says if Wilson is going to refuse, he'll just go get the clothes himself. Wilson, suddenly alarmed, asks where he thinks he's going. Vincent tells him he's heading straight to the Grand Chamberlain to personally report that his servant Wilson is refusing to do his job. The threat hangs in the air and Wilson goes completely silent, totally intimidated. He backpedals fast, insisting he'll go get the clothes right away. Wilson snatches the laundry and practically bolts down the hall, promising to get the room cleaned up immediately. As he scurries away, Wilson mutters to himself that even a timid young master shouldn't be disrespected, so blatantly suspecting he was put here as some kind of test. A correct assessment, a voice says. Julian materializes behind Vincent. Vincent had already figured it out. He guesses the family wanted to see how he'd handle an unruly servant and prove he knows how a 7th young lord is supposed to behave. Julian then reveals that Wilson was supposedly a former gang member with a high body count and asks what Vincent plans to do. Vincent just laughs, explaining that real killers carry a unique, unmistakable energy. He says Wilson has zero trace of that aura, looks totally harmless, and seems like a massive coward, meaning all his tough guy stories are just hot air. Julian is skeptical, asking how Vincent could possibly know all of that in such detail. Vincent just turns to him with a deeply sinister smile. He knows, because he has lived that life. A chill snakes down Julian's spine as he wonders what exactly he has unleashed. He fears he might have summoned something far more terrifying than any spirit king. Just then, a voice calls from beyond the door, announcing Wilson's return. The servant enters holding a stack of freshly laundered clothes, mentioning he took care of what Vincent had worn the previous day. Vincent, already looking sharp and presentable, offers his thanks and gestures to the spotless room, asking for his approval. Wilson just grunts, telling Vincent to avoid turning his quarters into a war zone again. Vincent gives a casual, easy agreement. Wilson smirks internally, thinking the boy seems much more obedient now, still just a pathetic, powerless kid. But then Vincent's tone shifts, ordering Wilson to retrieve a 1-meter wooden sword of a specific weight and make from the family's private storeroom. A smug grin spreads across Wilson's face. And what if I say no? Vincent's reply is dangerously calm. Then I'll just go to the storeroom myself. He muses aloud, wondering how he'd explain that to the men guarding the gate. He reminds Wilson that those guards are elite warriors, loyal only to the direct bloodline, leaving the threat against a defiant servant hanging in the air. In a panic, Wilson lunges, grabbing Vincent from behind and begging him to wait. But as he makes contact, his eyes pop wide in disbelief. On pure instinct, Vincent flips Wilson clean over his shoulder, slamming him hard onto the floorboards. Pinning Wilson's wrist to the ground, Vincent's voice is low. My apologies, he says. I have some unpleasant memories of being grabbed from behind. He leans in. Remember that, and don't ever surprise me again. As Wilson groans, crippled with pain, Vincent is secretly reeling. His own body is screaming from the strain of that single simple move. Wilson, seething with rage, begins to gather mana for a curse, but Vincent just turns around looking puzzled. Then Vincent's eyes flash a demonic red. Was there something else you wanted to say? He growls. The raw pressure is suffocating. Terrified, Wilson just stammers out the details for the sword again. Vincent lets out a little laugh. That's funny, I thought you just said you didn't want to get it. Flustered, Wilson denies it and scrambles out of the room, slamming the door shut. A moment later, he peeks his head back inside to insist that the slam was just a gust of wind. Vincent just smirks, muttering that he hadn't even said a word. Wilson storms down the hallway, fuming and vowing never to be humiliated like that again. He marches off, wooden sword in hand. He swears he will never lose to Vincent again. He will prove his own strength. When he returns, Wilson just tosses the sword on the floor with a blunt "here." It's a clear attempt to provoke him, but Vincent completely ignores the petty display and instead begins telling a story about a one-armed man he once knew intimately. He explains how the man's missing right arm made his life a living hell and ultimately led him to a tragic fate. Wilson's face goes pale. Mortified, he quickly picks up the sword and presents it properly. Vincent finally thanks him. Drowning in shame at how pathetic he must look, Wilson just announces the errand is complete and retreats, the doors closing quietly behind him. Vincent takes the wooden sword, inspecting its balance. It was time. Time for some real training. He immediately starts laying into the practice targets. The sharp crack of wood echoes through the hall as he shouts with every powerful blow. But soon he's panting heavily. He's shocked at how pathetic this body is tiring out after only a handful of swings. He has such a long way to go, but despite the burning in his lungs, he savors the familiar burn. This is what he was born for. He is a martial artist to his very core. Lost in his training, a careless swing goes wide and nearly collides with another blade. "My bad," he pants. A blonde kid in striking red armor appears, saying the mana signature was so weak he assumed the hall was empty. He eyes Vincent up and down. "Who the hell are you?" The boy introduces himself as Revan Adinka, then his eyes light up with recognition. "Oh, I've heard about you. You're the useless trash of the main family." Vincent remains silent, sizing him up. He knows this kid. Revan is from a distant, insignificant branch of the family. Julian chimes in that this kid, Revan, is also the frontrunner to win the entire upcoming assembly of True Swords. And then, Julian drops another piece of intel, reminding Vincent that he's already met Revan's father. The arrogance is a family trait. Revan plants his feet, radiating an unmistakable challenge. Julian warns him that Revan is the most talented 13-year-old swordsman among all the Adinka branch families, and he's here specifically to challenge Vincent before the assembly begins. The Assembly of True Swords. Julian explains that it's a life-or-death tournament, where kids from all the families affiliated with the Adinka clan fight with real swords, usually starting from age 14. And he adds that the grand prize for the winner is the right to duel a direct heir of the same age, which in this case would be the notoriously weak Vincent. Revan lets out a mocking laugh. "I just hope you don't plan on hiding when it's time to use real swords." When Vincent calmly replies that he isn't afraid of a sword, Revan roars with laughter. "At least you talk a big game for a main family reject. And you should learn to speak with some damn dignity." Vincent shoots back. He tears into Revan, calling him out for disrespecting a relative who was just minding his own business. Vincent recalls how even the one-armed Davin was treated with universal respect on these grounds. He accuses Revan of disgracing the name of all martial artists as he smashes another practice dummy to splinters. Then he aims his verbal attack directly at Revan's father, implying he clearly learned such garbage manners at home. Revan absolutely explodes. "You dare insult my father. I'll punish you for that right here, right now." Julian warns that Revan is a 2-star warrior who possesses the Steelman trait. He's overwhelmingly stronger than Vincent's current body. But all Vincent senses is the stench of an inferiority complex. A branch family member using mana against someone who can't even wield it properly. He judges both the father and the son as having zero martial honor. Determined to educate the brat, Vincent grips his wooden sword tightly. It was time to show him the colossal gap between a modern master and a spoiled kid. Discipline in this era is a total joke. He remembers that back in his day, a stunt like that would have earned you a brutal beatdown from the elders. Vincent's wooden sword freezes the tip, aimed perfectly at Raven's throat. Raven is absolutely shook. How could a boy with zero mana or imagery even dare to point a blade at him? And what's with this insane confidence radiating off him? Logically, Raven knows there's no way he can lose, but his gut is screaming that Vincent is a legit threat, like a blade ready to slice him at any second. Vincent's whole vibe suddenly darkens, and Raven feels that danger closing in. Overwhelmed, Raven just blurts out that they should call it a day. Vincent just scoffs at him, saying if he's scared of a wooden sword, how's he going to survive the assembly when the blades are real? He reminds Raven that real steel spills real blood out. There. All Raven can do is hiss an insult under his breath, his teeth grinding with barely contained fury. And then he just snaps, screaming that he'll kill Vincent right here, right now, as he charges forward. Raven's face twists into a mask of pure murderous rage as he lunges. Julian screams for Vincent to get out of the way, but Vincent calmly says Raven can't even touch him. In that exact moment, Raven's armored bodyguards slam into him, restraining him and declaring he's not allowed to fight Vincent here. Julian lets out a huge sigh of relief, while Vincent just smirks, his plan having worked perfectly. The guard explains that if Vincent got injured now, he could weasel out of the assembly, insisting Raven has to wait for the official duel. Raven, still fuming, promises to obliterate Vincent at the Assembly of True Swords, spitting that he's a coward. Later, Julian goes off on Vincent for provoking Raven, saying the guards literally had to save his skin. Vincent just blows it off, claiming he was just teaching a rude kid some manners. Julian just groans, lamenting that he summoned a total menace instead of a legendary spirit king, while Vincent is already calmly studying up on the current era. While flipping through a history book, Vincent freezes. He's staring at a portrait that looks exactly like a younger version of himself. Julian snaps him out of it, ordering him to stop messing around and move on from image theory to the real game changers' blessings and traits. Julian explains that traits are basically man-made blessings reverse-engineered by analyzing divine powers. Vincent is horrified that blessings can be mass-produced, and warns this is a huge disrespect to the gods that will definitely bring punishment. Julian just fires back that spirits already got their punishment, and couldn't care less about the warning. He confirms that Raven has a trait called Steel Man, which makes his body insanely strong and hard. Julian then drops another bomb. Traits can evolve down different paths like tech trees in a video game, and the Steel Man build is maxed out for insane defense and destructive force. Vincent listens, as Julian warns that only training his old martial arts will leave his skill set dangerously unbalanced even if it makes him powerful in the short term. Vincent stares at a decapitated training dummy and remembers that Raven once reached an unreal level of swordsmanship, wondering if it was because of some OP trait. Comparing himself to these new era monsters, Vincent realizes he needs to master new skills, and fast. Time passes, and the academy courtyard basically becomes Vincent's personal training ground. Day in and day out, he's there swinging his wooden sword with a terrifying determination, carving lethal arcs through the air. Onlookers start whispering, mocking how Vincent trains with his left hand, can't use imagery, and gets gassed super quickly. Another officer finally steps in and tells the haters to shut it, reminding them not to talk trash about Vincent, the vice commander of the White Sword Unit. Just then, Merlin shows up and asks why they think the Adinka young lord's training is so funny. Terrified of Merlin, the guards stutter out an apology and get out of there. Merlin feels like he should lecture them more, but stops when he sees the utterly exhausted Vincent. Merlin admits that to most people he looks like the shame of the Adinka family, just a maneless boy blindly swinging a sword. Julian nervously asks if they can maybe train somewhere more private, but Vincent just shakes his head. He says he doesn't have the time or the stamina to go anywhere else. Vincent thinks back to how he's always been looked down on yet, as the one-armed Davin. He still defeated the legendary Stormblade when no one thought he could. He remembers turning all that trash talk into roaring cheers back then, and he knows he can pull off the same comeback now. Merlin steps forward and hands Vincent a high-grade recovery potion to help him survive an even crazier training regimen. He explains the potion will make his practice easier, which makes Vincent ask who he is. Merlin formally introduces himself as the vice commander of the White Sword Unit. Vincent confirms that Merlin isn't laughing at him anymore, and Merlin admits that at first he was, but he's had a total change of heart. Merlin says that Vincent's desperate gaze proves he's seriously searching for something, and that anyone who mocks a warrior with that kind of fire is the real joke. Deeply moved, Vincent makes a silent vow to remember Merlin's name. Vincent apologetically tells Merlin he must be swamped with patrols and suggests he get back to his duties. As Merlin walks away, he feels a definite shift in Vincent's aura and silently wishes the young lord good luck. Fired up by the potion and his own resolve, Vincent starts laying into the practice dummy with more and more power. He continues his relentless assault, gradually tearing the target to splinters. Between sessions, he chugs more of the potion, using it as fuel for non-stop training even when he's not sparring. Vincent also dives deep into his studies, with Julian hovering nearby and practicing his footwork. Vincent reminds himself to keep his weight on his right leg. He syncs that balance with the rotation of his hips, and then he feels it. A spark of mana finally beginning to circulate from his heart. Vincent's senses dial up to 11, letting him perceive the very flow of power. He perfectly visualizes the one-armed Davin sword technique. In his mind, he breaks the technique down into a sequence of dots and lines, a blueprint for its devastating abilities. With flawless timing, Vincent executes the perfected move. The sword's arc cleaves the practice dummy's head clean off. Absolutely hyped, Vincent realizes his theory worked. With total conviction, he declares his new swordsmanship system is complete. Elsewhere, Wilson is whining about how Vincent's crack of dawn training routine is forcing him to grind even harder. Seriously ticked off, Wilson plots to put Vincent in his place. He brings him breakfast, faking politeness. Vincent just eyes the meal, his gaze dripping with suspicion. The serving is pathetic, and has clearly been messed with, proving him right. Vincent casually points out that if Wilson wanted to jack his food, he probably shouldn't have made it so blindingly obvious. He even calls him out for not wiping the crumbs from his own mouth. The evidence is literally on his face. Vincent says he'll let it slide this time, but makes it clear this can't become a habit. His eyes flare a menacing red as he warns Wilson not to push his luck again. Wilson totally panics and starts flexing about his gangster past, boasting about the people he's put down to try and scare Vincent. Vincent just deadpans that Wilson sounds terrifying, then keeps on eating without a care. Using mana-fueled telepathy, he schools Wilson that ruling through fear is basic. It doesn't earn you real loyalty, which is exactly why he keeps his own power on a leash. To prove his point, he effortlessly bends a fork with his mind. He tells him the real flex isn't the trick, but the fact that he now wields mana in the first place. Vincent tells Wilson to drop the ego and get on his side. He promises that soon Wilson won't feel any shame in serving him in Denka. Vincent lays it out one day. Wilson will have to choose between cowering in fear or offering up genuine loyalty. Overwhelmed, Wilson sputters that loyalty can't be forced like that. But the second he leaves the room, Wilson freezes, completely shook and lost in thought. His heart hammers in his chest as he admits to himself that Vincent's charisma just went supernova. Meanwhile, Merlin is strolling through the training grounds and spots the busted-up dummies. He just figures Vincent wrapped up his practice early, but then he takes a closer look at one dummy and it stops him dead in his tracks. He sees the top of the target was sliced off perfectly, like it was done with a real steel blade, but he knows for a fact Vincent has only ever trained with a wooden sword. He runs his fingers over the impossibly clean cut, feeling its precision. Merlin is floored, wondering how anyone could level up this fast in just a couple of days. Deeply impressed and totally intrigued, Merlin silently whispers Vincent's name. Julian is in awe of Vincent's insane fighting style, asking what kind of martial art he's even learning. Later, Vincent is getting changed, gearing up for his next power move. Wilson dutifully folds the laundry as Vincent gets dressed, with Julian hovering close by. Julian comments on how respectful Wilson has suddenly become, and Vincent remarks that some people are quick to take charge, but once they lose that power, they can never get it back. Vincent glances at his own hand, and then questions the quality of the clothes he's wearing. He tells Wilson the fabric is lead iodine cotton cheap trash that poisons the soil and is totally beneath a noble family. Vincent then adds that the food is also way below the standard their family's budget should afford. Looking at Julian, he drops the bomb. Someone inside this mansion is definitely skimming money off the top. In another part of the house, servants are whispering about Levi's death and the embezzlement rumors. While Wilson keeps folding clothes completely clueless, Vincent deduces the thief can't be him. It has to be someone with more power. In a different room, Revan is savagely practicing his swings with a wooden sword, channeling raw, fiery energy into every strike. Drenched in sweat but satisfied, Revan finally pauses to catch his breath. Suddenly, Vincent materializes behind him with a terrifying aura, asking why Revan is so scared of a simple wooden sword. Revan grinds, his teeth humiliated that he got startled. He roars back that he isn't scared of anything, and unleashes a furious swing with all his might. Later, while Revan is still going hard in his training, his father calls out to him from the doorway. Revan turns, answering respectfully, and his dad notes that his practice seems to be on point. But then Revan's father gets dead serious, reminding him the assembly of true swords is just around the corner. He says to escape their life of poverty and the shame of being a branch family, Revan absolutely must defeat Vincent, and Revan agrees. Gripping his son's leg, the father screams that victory isn't an option, it's a necessity. He orders Revan to become the one to finally dethrone the main family. Revan agrees out loud, but privately thinks his old man is getting more and more obsessed as the event gets closer. Revan tells himself that crushing Vincent is the only way to bring some peace back to his father and their family. At the same time, Julian victoriously wraps up his project, a massive file containing intel on every single fighter in the assembly of true swords. Vincent is blown away. The dossier has everything, not just their names, but detailed breakdowns of each fighter's habits and signature moves. Julian calls Vincent a straight-up monster for being so ridiculously thorough, and Vincent just takes it as a compliment. Vincent confirms his game plan. It's time to make his official debut. He would absolutely dominate by merging the borrowed power of the Spirit King with the legendary Miracle Stone. He remembers the Miracle Stone is a unique mana crystal given to the champion, a prize that instantly supercharges both the body and mana of whoever consumes it. Julian notes that Vincent's expression, his data, everything screams a desperate hunger for this win. Vincent thinks to himself that losing after stacking the deck so heavily in his favor would be an absolute stain on his honor as a warrior. He tells Julian that while the Spirit King plan is off the table, he's going to give him a victory that's even more epic. Vincent vows to deliver this greater triumph at the assembly itself. A moment later, he rings a small bell, summoning Wilson. Wilson scrambles into the room out of breath, asking what the young master requires. A sly grin plays on Vincent's lips as he says he has a special job for Wilson. Soon after, Wilson is seen clutching a written message following his orders. The family's Grand Chamberlain Raelza looks up from her mountain of paperwork as Wilson knocks. Announcing his presence with a shaky voice, Wilson peeks his head in and gives her a clumsy greeting, asking for a moment with Grand Chamberlain Raelza. Without even pausing her writing, Raelza drills him with a cold stare and tells him to get to the point. Crushed by her immense presence, Wilson is thinking, man, the aura of a 7-star martial artist is absolutely terrifying. He explains that young Master Vincent has a message for the family head, which makes Raelza sneer, assuming Vincent is too much of a coward to come himself. But then, Wilson drops the bombshell. Vincent has specifically requested the family head's personal attendance at the Assembly of True Swords. He keeps going, explaining that Vincent plans to finally prove he's worthy of being a main house, a Denka. This is huge because the family head has never once shown up to watch the tournament. It clicks for Raelza. Vincent must know she's been skimming from the budget. This invitation isn't a request. It's the price for her silence. Recalling Vincent's exact words, Wilson repeats the command, "Make the impossible possible." Raelza's head snaps up. She presses Wilson, demanding to know what he just said. He just stammers that he was quoting the young master, before she barks at him to get out. Alone, now her mind racing, she realizes Vincent sent Wilson on purpose. It wasn't cowardice. It was a power move to establish his authority. With a knowing, chilling smile, she wonders if Vincent has finally figured out her secret plans for him. Elsewhere, in a lavish chamber swirling with raw energy, the Adenka family head meditates his bear back to the door. The sheer power, radiating from his muscular frame, screams his status as a legendary master. Without turning, he senses Raelza's presence and calls out her name. Raelza formally announces that young Master Vincent has invited him to the Assembly of True Swords, and the patriarch just scoffs at the idea. He tells her not to be ridiculous, but Raelza insists, repeating that Vincent wants to prove his right as a main house heir. Prove his worth, the patriarch echoes, dripping with doubt. He asks if she seriously thinks Vincent has the skills for that. Raelza concedes that in terms of pure lineage and worth, Vincent isn't there yet, and that's the whole reason he needs to demonstrate his potential. This time, she practically begs the family head to go, even offering to serve as his official witness, which makes him question if she understands the weight of that promise. Dropping to her knees, Raelza swears on her life that if Vincent fails to prove his worth, she will pay the price with her own head. Stunned, the patriarch asks her why she'd make such an insane gamble. Her answer is simple. Vincent has her cornered by exploiting one of her personal weaknesses. When he calmly guesses that it involves her embezzling the family funds, Raelza's eyes go wide with shock. She confesses, admitting she diverted the money to secure Vincent's future, and offers a deep apology. The family head brushes it off, saying he has no reason to interfere since her loyalty is to Vincent's mother, not to him. Still, he can't help but think that this kind of indirect power play is exactly the move Arvana would pull, letting Vincent declare his ambition without sacrificing any pride. He muses aloud, wondering if Vincent truly has his mother Arvana's blood running through his veins. Intrigued despite himself, the patriarch finally gives in. He declares that he will go. He will witness the Assembly of True Swords with his own two eyes. The day of the tournament finally dawns. A thunderous roar erupts from the packed stadium as the young swordsmen make their entrance. Revan, clad in armor, but carrying no sword, walks with an overwhelming, almost arrogant confidence. Fire burns in Revan's eyes as he vows that today is the day he finally crushes Vincent. His gaze drifts to the high platform where he recognizes one of the figures. He can't believe it. The Patriarch Khan himself is actually here. Revan's mind races. He must be here to witness the rise of a collateral genius like him. He promises himself he'll put on a show and claim victory in the most spectacular way possible. A herald's voice booms, officially kicking off the Assembly of True Swords. In one of the opening matches, Revan unleashes a brutal assault on his opponent, growling at him to just give up and die. His rival barely gets his shield up in time, but the sheer force of the blow sends cracks, spiderwebbing across its surface. Enraged, the opponent launches a counterattack, screaming that Revan shouldn't get so cocky. Revan just tanks the hit, his defense holding strong, and smirks at how little damage he took. He boasts that such pathetic attacks are completely useless against his Steel Man attribute, as he winds up for another devastating strike. A single brutal strike shatters his opponent's defense, launching him across the arena and ending the fight. Revan's father roars with pride from the stands, celebrating his son's victory. The crowd buzzes, remarking on Revan's 2-star rank and his overpowered defensive ability, speculating that a kid from a side branch might actually win the whole tournament for the first time ever. Watching from a shadowy corridor, Vincent scoffs. He'll admit, by the standards of 500 years ago, these combatants would be hailed as geniuses, but in the present day, their fighting styles are utterly shallow. He sees that most of them just crutch on their innate gifts. Instead of gaining any real combat experience moving like puppets following a script, he watches Revan's reckless but confident assault and instantly understands why the kid can be so aggressive. Revan takes a dramatic bow before the adoring crowd, soaking in their thunderous applause. His eyes then lock onto Vincent, and he smirks, surprised the coward showed up, instead of running, ready to utterly crush him. Vincent just smirks right back, thinking that Revan better hurry his butt onto the stage, because running away is the last thing on his mind. The Patriarch observes the entire scene from his throne in stoic silence. In the arena, below swords clash, and the crowd goes wild. A young warrior is sent flying backward with a violent blast, crying out as he hits the ground. The referee declares Revan Adenka the winner of the match. Revan stands triumphantly, announcing that he has mowed down every last one of his opponents. With a smug grin, Revan explains that, according to family tradition, the final duel will be against his so-called close friend, Vincen Adenka. Vincen meets his gaze, his own eyes burning with raw determination. Challenge accepted. Both fighters now stand before the referee in the heart of the packed arena. The official Zarin of the elite White Sword unit begins the proceedings, but Vincen immediately interrupts him with a special condition. He calls out for his attendant Wilson, who appears in an instant. Vincen declares he will battle his distant cousin using only a wooden practice sword, using only his left hand, and he'll even give him 3 free attacks. The seated elders erupt in confused whispers, thinking Vincen has gone insane. Vincen then adds that he won't move from his spot until those 3 attacks are over. Revan's face flushes with fury as he accuses Vincen of disrespecting him. The audience erupts, shouting that Vincen has no martial skill and calling him an arrogant heir. Revan's father screams that Vincen is just making excuses for his inevitable loss, sparking concern throughout the stands. Then the patriarch makes an unexpected decision. He allows Vincen's ridiculous conditions. From his balcony, the patriarch's voice booms, warning Vincen to back up his bold words with action. Vincen coolly promises the patriarch that he'll do exactly that. The rattled referee announces that the duel of the direct descendants will now commence. Revan braces himself, urging Vincen to bring it on as they're told to get ready. Vincen just reminds him that he's still giving him the first 3 hits. Zarin raises his flag, and the fight officially begins. Revan lunges with pure killing intent, screaming at Vincen to die right there. Vincen calmly registers the incoming blow as the first strike. A flashback hits him a study session, where Julian predicted that most initial attacks in this kind of style are simple, short stabs. Remembering this advice, Vincen smirks internally, wondering just how long Revan's arrogance will hold up as he faces the attack head-on. Revan is absolutely certain he's just landed a critical hit on Vincen, but Vincen is already dissecting the footwork, realizing the first thrust was just a feint, and that the true threat is the second stab coming right after. Revan boasts that he's got Vincen right where he wants him, completely defenseless. Vincen sees how crude Revan's movements are, relying on his invulnerability attribute instead of solid fundamentals, and he begins to channel his power. Thinking about the design of greatswords, he finishes the thought out loud saying, "Greatswords are not meant for stabbing." And with an almost effortless motion, he parries Revan's massive blade. Revan freezes shocked, realizing his sword was just swatted away by someone with overwhelmingly more strength. A dark, menacing aura starts to radiate from Vincen as he reminds him that he's already used up 2 of his free attacks. Revan curses under his breath, his frustration and desperation growing. He roars, "Don't get cocky," and unleashes another huge fiery swing. Vincen counters with a single, precise blow, catching Revan completely off balance. A quick shift in footwork trips, Revan shattering his stance. The wooden sword and Vincen's own leg slam Revan into the ground, smashing his head hard against the arena floor. A raw scream of agony rips from Revan's throat from the sheer force of the impact. Looming over his fallen cousin with a terrifying aura, Vincen informs him that he has now used up his 3rd and final free attack, leaving Revan utterly stunned. Clutching his wooden sword, Vincen makes a silent promise to Julian. He then remembers the vow he made to his father, and declares for all to hear, "Now it's my turn to attack." Solidifying his resolve, he pours his energy into the wooden blade. Vincen prepares to finally launch his own offensive. A collective gasp sweeps through the audience. Shouts of utter disbelief echo through the stadium. The referee just stares speechless at Vincen's incredible display of skill. The patriarch watches intently from his throne, his eyes narrowed and his thoughts hidden. Revan's father reacts with pure shock and outrage. At this unbelievable turn of events, he screams at Revan from the stands to get up while Vincen waits calmly, his wooden sword at the ready. Revan forces himself to his knees, his mind reeling at how he could be struggling against someone who supposedly couldn't even use mana. And standing beside Vincen, visible only to him, is Julian. Is totally stunned, asking what that even was, and Vincen just casually says it was a simple hand control technique. Then we get a flashback to his training, where his master drilled into him that a true martial artist has to know how to shut enemies down even without a weapon. Revan struggles to his feet, claiming he gets it now as he prepares for another round. He figures Vincen must have just lucked into some lame, divine trait, and starts mocking him, calling it pathetic. Julian is absolutely fuming at the disrespect, but Vincen is ice cold, saying, Revan can believe whatever he wants, but his delusions are about to come to a screeching halt. Revan bellows for him to shut up, vowing to end Vincen's cheap tricks with his very next attack. Julian frantically warns Vincen, yelling that a head-on block is suicide and he needs to dodge. Vincen just replies, "I know," as Revan's supercharged strike slams down, shattering the entire arena floor as Vincen moves. He becomes a blur inside a vortex of purple energy already coiling for a counter. Revan realizes way too late that in his powered-up stance, his entire side is exposed. Vincen's blade slashes across his shoulder, biting deep despite the steel body ability. Revan grabs his neck completely, baffled, shocked, that the hit doesn't even sting. His father shouts triumphantly from the stands that a mere practice sword can't even dream of piercing a steel body's defense. But Vincent is just analyzing the situation. With his body this trashed, he can't unleash his real power yet. He figures if Revan gets overconfident, he'll keep using the same attack pattern, a weakness Vincent is already setting up to exploit. The plan is to redirect Revan's own overwhelming power by using the force of his next blow. Revan lets out a roar as he charges another massive surge of energy building in his chest. Vincent's counter sends Revan rocketing into the air as spirals of mana erupt around them, and he locks eyes with the moderator. Vincent mentally blasts a message to Zeron: do absolutely everything in your power to stop a tragedy from happening. Zeron, totally confused, mutters in shock from the sudden mental pressure. Vincent thinks to himself that he has only one shot to get this right. He decides that using his ultimate sword skill once will probably shatter his own body, but he readies himself anyway. He's determined to finish this fight while Revan is still airborne and defenseless. Revan, stranded in midair, lets out a panicked scream. Fueled by pure rage, he swings down again, hurling insults at Vincent. But Vincent's perception has gone into overdrive. He can clearly see the exact arc of Revan's sword in his mind. He visualizes the glowing red line of Revan's blade and the cool blue line of his own, plotting the exact point where the two will intersect. He tells Julian to watch closely because he's about to demonstrate the sword technique he has truly mastered. The converging red and blue sword paths collide in a blinding explosion of light. A massive pillar of Vincent's purple energy erupts vertically, completely annihilating Revan's attack. The absolutely devastating slash tears across the entire arena, sending Revan hurtling through the air. Revan's father is frozen in horror, watching what just happened to his son. The patriarch's expression turns to stone as he grasps the terrifying power of Vincent's technique. Vincent explains how his skill literally slices through space itself, warping the very flow of mana. He reveals that this art severs everything, even an opponent's own techniques, calling it skill swordsmanship. Revan lets out a blood-curdling howl of terror and agony, clutching the stump of his shoulder and just screaming about his arm. It dawns on him that it's been completely severed. Vincent coolly asks the stunned moderator, "Do I have to cut off his leg too for you to declare my victory?" Zeron frantically raises the flag and proclaims Vincent and Adenka the winners. Revan's father and the officials swarm the stage, desperately trying to stop the bleeding and shouting for a priest. The patriarch tears into Zeron for failing to prevent the disaster, and ashamed Zeron apologizes, taking full responsibility. Julian warns Vincent that his body is at its absolute limit, and that he needs to rest. But Vincent, with a faint smile, says he can't collapse just yet. Vincent tells Julian he kept his promise. Later in the throne room, someone calls out to the patriarch, addressing him as Lord. The patriarch recalls that he had agreed to personally judge the power gap between the direct members of the Adenka line. He confirms that he has now seen it for himself. The patriarch announces to everyone present that the champion of the Assembly of True Swords is once again Vincent Adenka. As the crowd applauds, he orders everyone inside, declaring that the award ceremony will begin immediately. Night falls over the estate under a starry, crescent moonlit sky. Inside a grand hall, the patriarch presides over a formal gathering, with Vincent and countless nobles in attendance. A jeweled miracle stone, the grand prize, is displayed in an ornate box. The patriarch declares that the one who triumphed over impossible odds, Vincent, will now receive the miracle stone. A gloved hand lifts the glowing gem, ready to present it. But Revan's father storms into the hall, shouting that the result and the reward are an absolute joke. He rants that Vincent's victory must have been some kind of cheap trick. Julian nervously whispers to the patriarch, suggesting that maybe Vincent had tapped into an apostle's power. A priest rushes up to Revan's father to report that an unforeseen problem has come up. The patriarch calmly asks the priest what's wrong. Surrounded by healers pouring magic into Revan, the priest begins his report on the boy's arm, and he grimly concludes that Revan's severed arm cannot be reattached, repeating the devastating news. The priest explains that young Lord Revan's body is rejecting the arm. Revan writhes in agony as they confirm it seems to be completely impossible for the limb to ever be reattached. The words hit Revan's father like a physical blow. He stumbles back, horrified by the vision of his son living as a cripple. The priest can only offer a weak apology. Enraged, Revan's father lunges forward, grabbing the holy man and roaring, "What kind of priests are you if you can't even mend a single arm?" While the priest stammers that it's a wound unlike any he's ever witnessed, Julian calls out to Vincent, who's been standing silently lost in thought. The priest elaborates, his voice trembling, that the stump looks like it was severed by a power far beyond the reach of his divine magic. The patriarch listens intently as the priest issues a grave warning: if they hesitate any longer, not even a high priest will be able to save the arm. Seizing the moment, Revan's father twists the situation into a formal accusation, declaring before the patriarch that such an impossible wound is proof Vincent used some forbidden dark art. A wave of whispers ripples through the assembled nobles. He might be onto something. Did Vincent really rely on apostolic powers? Vincent steps forward, requesting permission from the Patriarch to address these suspicions. He gets the nod. He argues that since this entire assembly was held under the Patriarch's watch, everything that transpired has already been sanctioned by his authority, and the victory has been rightfully declared his. Vincent drives the point home, stating that to deny his victory now is to openly defy the Patriarch's authority. In front of all the honored guests, he calls out Charles Adenka by his full name. Do you, he asks, his voice dangerously low, truly believe your judgment is superior to that of the Patriarch? Charles is struck dumb, unable to answer. Then Vincent drops a bombshell, ordering Zeren of the White Sword Unit to arrest Charles on the spot, stunning the entire room. When Zeren asks for clarification, Vincent confirms the shocking command. He wants his own friend, Revan's father, Charles Adenka, placed under arrest. Charles sputters in protest, arguing that even as a direct heir, Vincent has no right to do this. But Vincent's reply is cold and swift. Publicly questioning the Patriarch is all the justification he needs. Torn but loyal Zeren agrees to follow the order. He binds a struggling Charles with rope, ignoring the man's desperate cries to be set free. Charles looks up his face, a mask of disbelief, as the proceedings are turned against him. The Patriarch then informs Charles that given the circumstances, he actually owes Vincent a debt. He explains a core tenet of Adenka law: a person cannot be judged for the same crime twice. And if Vincent hadn't stepped in now, Charles would have faced a much harsher official punishment from the family later. Seeing him as a fellow father, the Patriarch offers a deal. The matter will be dropped if Charles swears to remain silent from this moment on. Defeated, Charles submits. The Patriarch turns to Vincent, telling him he handled the situation well. Vincent bows deeply in thanks, as Julian playfully notes that he seems awfully pleased with himself. Vincent admits that earning praise from the Patriarch is an exceptionally rare and valuable thing. Still tied up, Charles desperately calls out to his son, who lets out a pained groan from the nearby table. The healer attending to Revan mutters that if a solution isn't found soon, the boy's right arm will be gone for good. Revan weakly protests, but Julian urgently whispers Vincent's name, hatching a plan. The look on Vincent's face shows he's listening. Vincent immediately sees the strategic advantage. This could be a golden opportunity. He agrees to Julian's audacious proposal. He turns to the priest and asks, not even a miracle stone could reattach Revan's right arm. The priest freezes instantly, realizing Vincent is talking about the legendary miracle stone that was promised as the prize for his victory. A sly smile spreads across Vincent's face. He takes the priest's stunned silence as confirmation that yes, such a miracle is possible. Vincent announces to the room, I was the one who severed Revan's arm. Is it not fitting that I be the one to resolve this? The Patriarch grants his consent. With the floor now, his Vincent reminds everyone how Revan had publicly insulted his skills as a martial artist. Charles, mortified, hastily apologizes for his son's arrogance, begging for forgiveness. But Vincent coldly states that in the world of martial arts, words demand consequences. A guard hesitantly gives up his sword. A dark, powerful aura flares to life around Vincent as he raises the blade over the cowering, bound form of Charles. Charles fears the absolute worst. Vincent's voice rings out, demanding that he show the true remorse of a martial artist. He makes a stunning offer. If Charles does so, he will use the miracle stone to heal Revan's arm. Charles desperately begs to know what else Vincent could possibly want from him. The blue-haired boy's reply is chilling. For the price of a right arm. An equivalent right arm must be offered. The horrifying meaning dawns on Revan's father. Someone has to lose an arm. The boy scoffs internally, looking at the terrified adults. He calls them pathetic. He glances over and sees Revan is conscious, but staying quiet, then silently shames the grown-ups for prioritizing their own limbs over a child's future. Backed into a corner, Revan's father roars that he will make the sacrifice himself. He raises a sword, his entire body trembling. He grits his teeth, preparing to bring the blade crashing down on his own arm. Watching this unfold, the boy and his spectral companion have to admit, twisted as it is, the father truly loves his son. Revan's father steels his resolve. This is the only way. With a guttural scream, he swings the glowing sword towards his own limb. In that split second, the blue-haired boy's power flares. Prevent any accidents, he commands. Instantly, the swordsman Zeren appears, his own blade flashing through the air and knocking Revan's father back. He stops the gruesome act just in time. Revan's father, gasping for air, looks down to see his arm is still there, completely unharmed. The only damage is the shattered table beneath him. Zeren sheathes his sword coolly, telling the father to find a better use for his courage next time. The blue-haired boy kneels before the Patriarch, calmly reporting that the matter has now been concluded. The Patriarch himself commends Vincent, bestowing upon him a shimmering, multicolored crystal as a token of his triumph. With a gesture of deep respect, Vincent accepts the radiant miracle stone into his grasp. Without a moment's hesitation, Vincent turns to the Reverend, urging him to act fast, and pressing the stone into his hands to save Raven. The holy man begins to pray, calling on the healing goddess, Gaia, for compassion, as he channels the artifact's immense power to work a miracle. Then, in a stunning move, the Reverend puts the stone in his mouth and shatters the priceless artifact between his teeth. An explosion of light engulfs Raven's entire body, immediately beginning to mend his catastrophic wounds. Raven's father shouts in disbelief, witnessing his son's right arm regenerate in a flash of miraculous light. Julian starts stressing, complaining about wasting such a legendary artifact. But Vincent just claps back, reminding him that giving it away was Julian's idea in the first place. Still, Julian can't shake the feeling of regret, knowing that stone could have been a game-changer for them down the road. Unseen, a young servant is pressed against the door, secretly listening to everything. Absolutely buzzing from what he just overheard, the servant is completely floored, thinking Vincent is the coolest person he's ever seen. A little later, while they're eating, Vincent drops some serious wisdom on the servant, telling him that a day will come when he must choose between fear and loyalty. Fired up by this, the servant declares without hesitation that he has already made his decision. Seeing the father and son share a tearful hug, the servant realizes that loyalty is infinitely cooler. Some time passes, and the now devoted servant greets Vincent with a cheerful and formal, "Young master." Back in Vincent's room, Julian announces he's going to whip up some dinner, and Vincent just casually agrees. Julian wonders aloud why the servant is acting so formal all of a sudden, but Vincent points out that this is the exact kind of respect Julian was craving. Julian totally denies it, brushing it off, and hinting that he was playing a much bigger 4D chess game. Just then, a knock echoes from the door. Vincent figures it's just the Reverend, impressed by his speed, and tells him to come on in. The cleric enters the room and asks Vincent how he's been holding up. As Vincent racks his brain trying to place the man's face, the Reverend offers a polite greeting. He formally introduces himself as Dylan, a pontiff of the Gaia faith. Vincent cuts straight to the chase and asks why he's here, and Dylan explains he came to offer his personal thanks for the earlier events. Julian's jaw drops. He can sense that Dylan's presence here is a massive deal. Dylan then offers Vincent times Miracle Stone as a thank you gift. Vincent is baffled, arguing that the stone should have gone to Dylan as the reward for healing Raven. Dylan explains that his sacred duty is to guide people from suffering to peace, but in that critical moment today, he admits with shame that he actually hesitated, weighing a human life against the value of the stone. He says Vincent put him to shame by so easily giving up the prize he had rightfully earned. Dylan thanks Vincent for triggering this moment of profound self-awareness and insists he take the new stone. Vincent humbly suggests Dylan came to this realization on his own, but accepts the artifact as a sign of respect. Dylan expresses his gratitude one more time, and then pulls out something else for Vincent. He presents a very special-looking card, telling Vincent to flash it anytime he needs the temple's power on his side. Dylan then leans in, confiding that he's secretly been promoted to a second-class pontiff, which makes the card unbelievably powerful. Julian is absolutely bugging out, realizing how high-ranking Dylan actually is, while Vincent just asks if that's a big deal. Julian frantically explains that the card grants insane perks like unlimited healing. It essentially gives Vincent the status and authority of a second-class pontiff himself. Dylan takes his leave, remarking that he learned a great deal from Vincent. Our boy simply bids the pontiff farewell, still clutching the ridiculously overpowered privilege card. Julian beams with pride, telling Vincent that this new connection is a way bigger glow-up than relying on their old family healer, and Vincent gives Julian props for his master plan. A little embarrassed, but clearly happy with the praise, Julian admits he's a total sucker for a compliment, but then his expression shifts, remembering something else that has to do with earning praise. He says their father almost always eats alone, but on one occasion he invited a family member to join him, right after an assembly of true swords. Julian drops the bomb that the person who got that invite was their insanely strong second sibling, Dia, who had absolutely dominated the tournament. Vincent wonders if that same special dinner invitation might be on the table for him tonight. Julian crunches the numbers and figures the odds are about 50%. Vincent decides that even though his body is wrecked, he's going to get ready instead of crashing. Julian argues that the chances are only 50-50, but Vincent shuts him down, insisting that any possibility Julian brings up is worth preparing for. Julian blushes, clearly touched by Vincent's absolute faith in his predictions. Suddenly, the servant bursts into the room, shouting for the young master and making them both jump. Shaking like a leaf, the servant stammers out that the head of the family has personally summoned Vincent. Vincent remains completely chill, assuming this is the dinner invitation, and tells the servant to lead the way. As they walk off, the servant is in total awe, realizing Vincent even saw this coming. His admiration for his new master hits an all-time high. Night has fallen on the massive Adenka estate where the meeting is set to happen. Dressed in formal wear, Vincent strides down a lavishly decorated hallway, heading for his father's audience chamber. But his path is blocked by his stepmother Versa Highland, who sharply tells him to pick up the pace. She stands before him, formally acknowledging his incredible performance at the Assembly of True Swords. Vincent thanks her, explaining in his head that after his birth mother passed away, this woman became his new stepmom. He identifies her as Versa Highland, a legendary retired martial artist once known as the Giant, who now commands every aspect of the household. Versa tells Vincent their father is waiting and that it's time to go in. The two of them step into the patriarch's shadow-drenched, intimidating throne room, their footsteps echoing in unison. Inside, the patriarch sits enthroned, a figure of immense power as Versa presents Vincent to him. The patriarch's voice rumbles through the hall, calling Vincent's name. He says it again, but this time the name is a weapon, unleashing a tidal wave of suffocating aura. The air becomes thick, heavy, crushing the breath from Vincent's lungs as the immense pressure bears down on him. It hits him this crippling force wasn't there this morning. His father is running a twisted vibe check, testing if he can separate the man from the monster. Despite the strain, making his vision swim, Vincent speaks, calling out the sheer absurdity of intimidating your own kid in private. The patriarch asks, his voice dripping with ice, why Vincent thinks this power play is so unnecessary. Vincent shoots back that his own stepmother addressed the patriarch as father, meaning this is supposed to be family business, not a state affair. Versa instantly goes rigid, exposed for her slip-up, realizing Vincent caught her getting too comfortable. Impressed with Vincent's sharp observation, the patriarch kills the oppressive aura with a simple wave of his hand and actually compliments him for catching it. He explains he brought Vincent here to celebrate his victory, but also for a far darker purpose. The second item on the agenda, he reveals, is to look into some serious claims from Charles Adinka, targeting Vincent's powers. Vincent remembers Charles's venomous accusations, how he argued that if a third-class pontifex couldn't wield that kind of power, Vincent must have gotten it through some forbidden, shady method. Suddenly, the entire room is engulfed by a glaring crimson eye, a terrifying symbol of the absolute scrutiny now laser-focused on Vincent. At the same moment, Versa's own eye begins to glow ominously. As her truth-seeing power flares to life, a cold sweat slicks Vincent's skin as he realizes he's being completely picked apart by her supernatural, all-seeing gaze. Versa and the patriarch kick things off, debating if Vincent is some kind of apostle, but they ultimately agree he's shown zero evidence of any divine backing. A chilling sensation crawls up Vincent's spine. He instantly knows it's radiating from Versa and her uncanny ability to see through deception. Versa cuts straight to the point, grilling him on how a total novice managed to sever the arm of a two-star martial artist, her voice demanding to know what kind of technique he unleashed. Vincent calmly replies that his style is a dead ringer for the legendary swordsmanship of the celebrated Hero King. Versa's eyes narrow, acknowledging that the hero's legendary style was infamous for literally consuming wicked abilities, flashing an image of a knight obliterating dark powers. She even adds that the hero's blade was rumored to have put down the archdemon Daven himself. Listening to this completely fabricated version of events, Vincent mentally curses the web of lies the Kajin and Samyang families have spun around their history. Versa stalks closer, her hand gripping Vincent's arm, insisting he spill exactly how he learned, a sword style that mirrors the hero of Samyeon. With an unsettling intensity, she drills him with the same question, her voice low and dangerous, demanding to know how her son mastered such a forbidden art. She presses him again. Her voice dripping with fake sweetness, she asks if he won't confide in his own mother. It dawns on Vincent that while his father summoned him, his stepmother has hijacked this meeting and turned it into an interrogation. He gets it now. This was never about praise. This is an investigation to uncover the origin of his newfound power. Vincent recognizes that Versa is now steering the entire conversation, and he's effectively on trial, forced to defend where his sword techniques originated. Julian's spirit frantically materializes in his mind, screaming a warning for Vincent not to dare reveal the real truth. Julian frantically explains that Versa's eyes are a literal lie detector, and that any half-baked excuse will instantly set off her alarms. A wave of panic hits Vincent. What's he supposed to say? Confess that he's actually some old guy who time-traveled from 500 years in the past. Julian shakes it off and resolves to help, deciding he's going to jump in and provide the backup Vincent needs to sell his story. Versa's patience snaps. Answer me now, she commands, her threatening aura suffocating the entire room. Vincent mentally pleads for Julian to hurry, while Julian admits he's actually petrified of Versa. He's terrified she'll expose him as a total fraud. But Vincent channels his old master, telling Julian it only takes a single step of courage to overcome fear. He remembers his mentor's words crystal clear. Conquering your fear always begins with that one single step forward. So Vincent decides to take that leap himself. He looks her dead in the eye and declares with unnerving calm that he received a divine revelation. The room falls silent. Both Versa and the patriarch are stunned, asking if he seriously just said a revelation. Versa's eyes flash with suspicion as she pounces. How could he claim a revelation without any divine blessings to back it up? That would typically brand someone as a pawn of evil. Vincent silently throttles Julian in his mind for not giving him a heads up on that critical detail, freezing up under the weight of her accusation. Versa accuses him of being incredibly suspicious and threatens to drag him before the sacred court for a full-blown trial if he doesn't cook up a convincing explanation right now. Julian cuts in telling Vincent to follow his script to the letter, mapping out their only escape route from this verbal minefield. Taking Julian's cue, Vincent challenges her, suggesting that if Versa truly doubts his nature, she can have the temple itself verify him. Versa echoes his words, the temple intrigued by this new play. That's when Vincent reveals his trump card, the rank 3 miracle stone he got from Dolan. He argues that if there was any trace of evil inside him, it would have been exposed the moment the pontiffs bestowed the stone upon him. Versa instantly recognizes it as the very same miracle stone she had gifted to Dolan, and Vincent confirms he received it back from him as a present. Activating her power one last time, Versa's truth-seeing eyes scan him and come up empty. Her ability detects zero falsehood in his words. She's forced to ask again, this time with genuine curiosity, if he truly mastered his swordsmanship through nothing but a revelation. Vincent explains that the visions allowed him to witness incredible otherworldly sword movements, and he only recently decided to start imitating them. Julian chimes in through Vincent, adding his own genuine desire for change, explaining that, despite the enormous risk of suspicion, he couldn't stand being a cowardly bystander any longer. Together, Vincent and Julian weave their combined truths and raw ambition to finally eclipse the Samyeon family, and to see the Adenka family's true mission through to the end. Julian mentally cheers Vincent on, telling him he's nailing it, as Vincent explains he wanted to personally demonstrate their new strength to their extended family. He then adds that more than anything, he desperately wanted to prove his own growth to his father. Vincent delivers his final blow, stating that since the temple has already given him its stamp of approval, he trusts his father to make the final fair judgment. The patriarch falls silent, stroking his chin in thought. Versa reads the sign instantly. This familiar habit means her husband is genuinely satisfied. He bought Vincent's story. The patriarch breaks the silence, announcing his decision. He tells Vincent to continue his training in the martial arts. It's an official green light, a sign of his recognition. But Versa cuts in, reminding the patriarch that the Hero King's style is almost identical to that of the Demon King Davin. She's highlighting the catastrophic implications. The patriarch just responds coolly that he is completely aware of the connection. Versa lays out the political nightmare reasoning that using the Hero King's swordsmanship would undoubtedly provoke the powerful Samyeon family. On the other hand, framing it as the Demon King's art would dodge that accusation entirely. She asks if the patriarch factored all these political traps into his decision. He looks at her, his voice firm and final, and says he has already weighed every necessary factor, addressing her sharply, as my lady. With a long sigh, Versa finally concedes, ending the debate as she resigns herself to the patriarch's command. She turns to Vincent, letting him know that since the old man approved, he is now the one responsible for him, so he better work his butt off and not cause any trouble. Vincent instantly gets it. This is both a final warning and her first real acknowledgement. He bows his head respectfully, accepting her terms. The patriarch then beams, showering Vincent with praise for his incredible performance, and officially declares that he has proven his worth as a true descendant of the Adenka bloodline. As a bonus reward, he offers to grant Vincent any single thing his heart desires. Vincent's answer is simple and direct. All I want is to become stronger. The patriarch pushes back, insisting on a prize only he can provide. As he presses for an answer, Julian buzzes in Vincent's ear with a brilliant idea. Vincent asks for the ultimate privilege access to the family's secret library. The patriarch's eyes narrow, noting that only 3-star martial artists are permitted inside, and asks if Vincent has actually hit that rank. Vincent admits he's not there yet. He's brutally honest, saying he just wants to use this one opportunity to be selfish. The old man cracks a smile, amused by his audacity, and agrees, allowing Vincent access to the lowest floor of the 3-star library. Then he commands Versa to present Vincent with the legendary sword, Crimson Lotus, a move that leaves both Julian and Vincent totally stunned. He declares the sword is Vincent's reward for keeping his end of their bargain. Vincent's eyes widen as he gazes upon the flaming blade of Crimson Lotus, the exact sword his father used to carve his name into the annals of history. He's in awe of the historic Adenka family weapon, amazed that its edge is still lethally sharp after all these years. Julian zips around his head, ecstatic, and starts teasing Vincent about how hard he's fanboying. Vincent cuts him off. Don't get too hyped. This is just the start. With cold confidence, Vincent declares that they are destined for far greater achievements. This hits Julian hard. He remembers being disappointed that Vincent wasn't the Spirit King, but now watching him, he seriously doubts the real Spirit King could have pulled off something this epic. Julian admits to himself that Vincent is reckless and stuck in the past, but in that moment, he decides this is the man he can trust with his entire being. Vincent turns to Wilson. We're leaving. Wilson bows respectfully. But just as they're about to go, his stepmother's voice cuts in, asking to speak with him, and he turns around completely surprised. In a shocking twist, she actually commends Vincent for his grueling training, telling him she's proud. He manages a quiet thank you. Then she gets to the real reason she stopped him. As the champion, he is now required to enter the Crimson Fortress, and she asks him point-blank how he intends to conquer the Crimson Demon inside. The Crimson Fortress, a brutal Adenka training facility, a place so harsh that merely surviving its trials, is what separates the pretenders from the true martial artists. The entry requirements are steep. You must win the Assembly of True Swords, and you must subjugate a low-rank Crimson Demon. Vincent quietly asks Julian for a game plan, and Julian tells him to play dumb. Vincent turns back to his stepmother and admits he hasn't decided yet. The answer clearly surprises her. She was expecting him to have every detail mapped out. She shrewdly points out that his unorthodox sword style must have put his body through hell, and Vincent concedes that she's right. Then you will listen to my advice, she orders. Her warning is chilling. Trying to one-shot the Crimson Demon is suicide, and in his current condition, he would absolutely die. She repeats it for everyone to hear, her voice ringing with authority. The Crimson Demon cannot be defeated with a single strike. Julian is completely thrown off by her giving them advice, but Vincent figures it out. I think our dear stepmother has taken a liking to us. He explains his theory, recalling her own tragic backstory, how she was framed and imprisoned by her enemies for years. Vincent reasons that, with her newfound power in the family, and her eye that detects lies, she had the perfect chance to destroy them, but chose not to. So even if she doesn't like them, she's not an enemy. Vincent thanks her for the advice, and vows not to let her down. As she starts to explain more about the demon's nature, she trails off, lamenting to herself after Vincent has already walked away. She was just about to reveal the creature's key traits, but he left before she could finish. Watching his retreating back, she's struck by his unshakable warrior's spirit, and her heart actually flutters. Alone, she wonders if Savannah is watching from above. She knows Vincent has just taken a monumental step on his journey as a martial artist. She sends a silent message to the deceased. Savannah, our son has made incredible progress today. Elsewhere, Wilson is cheerfully doing chores loudly, vowing to support his young lord with everything he's got. His enthusiasm is met with an angry shout from another servant, accusing him of plotting something. Wilson, flustered, insists he's done nothing wrong. The maid Siri calls him out, suspicious, that he's planning to stir up trouble for the young master again. I'm just doing laundry, can't you see? Wilson protests. Siri looks at him bewildered, and asks if he's actually serious about doing manual labor. Wilson puffs out his chest smugly. The young lord has changed, he declares, so it's only right that his direct subordinate changes with him. Siri blows past his boasting and asks where their young lord is. Wilson grins, telling her she's way behind on the gossip, and gets ready to explain Vincent's whereabouts. The scene cuts to Vincent deep within the martial artist's private library. Walled in by towering stacks of books deep in study, Julian floats frantically between shelves, complaining that the specific records they're hunting for are missing. Vincent slams a book, shut, roaring in frustration. Why are there no records from 500 years ago? Julian drifts over, his expression grim. He points out that it's only that specific time period that's gone, as if it was deliberately erased from history, and dismisses any surviving accounts as mere fairy tales about the great demon and the hero King Vincent. It dawns on Vincent that history itself has been deliberately erased, with someone even corrupting the hero king's signature sword style. He decides to shelve the problem of his own stigma for now, and pour all his energy into mastering his swordsmanship to crush the Crimson Demon. To do that, he knows he needs a pre-imagery training technique, because he's not yet capable of using imagery himself. The gears start turning in Julian's head. The guy who dissed Father Arslan, the fact that Vincent wields the hero king's style, it's all sus. He finally wonders just who Vincent really is, and straight up asks him to spill the tea. Vincent freezes, dropping the bombshell that he's actually the great demon. Davin would totally freak Julian out. He wonders if he should even be this nervous. But he ultimately decides it would be a massive disrespect to Julian, the body's original soul, to expose that secret just yet. A hyped-up Julian tells Vincent to take a breath, absolutely convinced he's about to reveal something epic. But when Vincent tries to speak his true name, a searing blast of static floods, his senses completely censoring the name. Vincent asks him to run that back, but the ghost just recoils in agony. The second he tries to force the name out, an even more violent screech of feedback erupts, making Julian scream out loud. Alarmed, Vincent scrambles to his side, asking if he's all right. Julian just shakes his head, insisting he's fine, and begging Vincent to stop, pleading that he doesn't want to know the truth anymore. That's when Vincent's eyes catch something glinting among the scattered books on the floor. He picks up a volume titled First Love with a Watermill and just stares, wondering why a cheesy romance novel is mixed in with advanced mana training manuals. Vincent gets a gut feeling. Its placement was no accident. He cracks it open and his jaw drops. In a flash of shock, he realizes someone has brilliantly encoded a secret historical chronicle, the real, unvarnished past, inside a trashy romance story. Both he and Julian start reading their faces, turning beet red as they realize the spicy narrative is definitely not what they signed up for. Vincent has to admit it's a genius move. Burying the truth in this kind of book is the perfect way to throw enemies off the scent. His eyes light up as he calls out Julian's name, grabbing his attention. He points out that the novel's main character can't use imagery either, but instead has a trait called the power of love. This was no ordinary romance novel. He highlights a specific line claiming that traits should emerge from the natural flow of mana, not dictate it, basically telling them to ditch standard imagery theory and let their mana run wild. Julian is floored, pointing out that stacking mana without imagery is supposed to be a death sentence. But Vincent flips to another section describing a person who did exactly that, successfully stacked mana without imagery, and lived to tell the tale. The book called it a mana flow, infused with a trait, something they could potentially copy. He knows that traits are ridiculously powerful and jealously guarded secrets, but this book just handed them a massive cheat code to leveling up. Vincent immediately suggests they start testing the method, but Julian pushes back, reminding him he literally just said it was crazy dangerous. Sometime later, out in the courtyard, Sari comes running to greet Vincent, calling his name. Overcome with emotion, she asks if the rumors are true that he actually took down Revan Adenka and claimed the sword Crimson. Julian quietly asks who this girl is. Vincent explains she's their maid Sari, who'd been gone dealing with a family crisis. He remembers the original Vincent, who found so much comfort in Sari's kindness. He muses that even the loser version of himself had someone who genuinely cared about him. Vincent confirms the rumors and Sari nearly faints from pure relief. She confesses she was terrified he would be cast aside and forgotten after the assembly, and is overjoyed he proved everyone wrong. Vincent awkwardly whispers to Julian, asking if he has any idea how to comfort a crying woman. And Julian just deadpans that spirit, and magic tutorials don't really cover that. Vincent turns back to Sari and apologizes for keeping his training a secret, promising he's working his butt off to become a master she can truly be proud of. But right then, a familiar voice calls out as Revan appears. He says he has something important to discuss with Vincent. The trio, Vincent, Julian, and Sari, all whip around, stunned to see him there. Revan formally greets Vincent, stating he has something he needs to say. They all move inside, sitting in a thick, awkward silence, while Sari hovers nervously between the two men. Sari is practically vibrating with anxiety over the impending showdown. Revan just sits there, struggling to find his words. Julian thinks to himself that Revan is being weirdly quiet, for a guy who just announced he had something major to say. A nervous Sari finally shatters the silence by offering to make sandwiches. Without a word, Revan suddenly unsheathes his enormous sword, his face dead serious. Julian and Vincent are both jolted by the sudden move. Revan roars that he's here to repay Vincent for what went down at the Assembly of True Swords, shouting his name with raw intensity. As Revan lunges forward, Julian screams a warning. Vincent rips out Crimson just in time, thinking he seriously didn't see an attack this direct coming. Vincent instantly analyzes his opponent, realizing Revan has already started learning skill swordsmanship. His old tricks won't work anymore. Vincent yells at Sari to get out of the room now, but she stands her ground, crying that she can't just abandon him. Revan shouts Vincent's name, declaring that he is massively in his debt. He flashes back to when Vincent forgave his disrespect and handed over the Miracle Stone, which ended up saving his arm. He confesses that he greedily used the stone on himself, screwing over his father, but the miracle ended up fixing both his arm and his family's desperate situation. He felt like he'd gained the world without giving anything back. Refusing to be a coward any longer, Revan drops to one knee before Vincent gripping his sword tight. Revan sets his sword on the ground, pointing it toward Vincent as the ultimate offering of repayment he can make. Then, dropping to his knees, Revan pledges his absolute loyalty. Sari's jaw drops. She can't believe the distinguished young Lord Revan is actually kneeling to Vincent. Vincent sees this for what it is. Revan is dead serious, offering his very life in the sacred tradition of a martial artist. While Julian is side-eyeing the whole situation, Vincent knows that surrendering a sword this way is a warrior's most binding oath, a sign that this kid's sincerity is legit no matter what Julian thinks. Suddenly, it clicks for Julian their master plan, the one that needed Revan and the Dwarf King's blessing traits. Vincent decides he won't just blindly trust Revan, but a new strategy forms in his mind. He unsheathes his own blade, Crimson taking Revan's silence as consent, and places it on Revan's shoulder, beginning the sacred ritual to accept his vow. He declares that he accepts Revan's allegiance and vows to protect him, unless the day comes that Revan betrays that trust. The moment Revan sees the legendary Crimson Lotus in Vincent's hand, he realizes Vincent had to have already been chosen by the family's patriarch. A massive grin spreads across Revan's face as he promises he will never regret this oath, thanking Vincent for accepting him. Sari is just totally floored by the solemn ceremony she just witnessed. She's practically beaming, thinking Vincent's glow-up is so complete that his old reputation as a nobody feels like a total fever dream. The moment is cut short by Julian, who awkwardly interrupts right after they've secured Revan, ready to jump into their next phase. He enthusiastically asks if now is the time to try and extract the Dwarf King's blessing traits from their new subordinate. The scene pulls back, showing the mansion's exterior as this intense new training is set to begin. In another part of the estate, the Patriarch gets an update from Vinchen's stepmother. Vincen plans to enter the Crimson Fortress in the next year. He questions her about the Crimson Demon conquest, probing to see how prepared Vincen truly is. She reveals she tried to give Vincen the full rundown on the demons, but he didn't even ask, acting like he already had it in the bag. She describes Crimson Demons as phantom-like beings that can only be damaged by third-star mana or higher, making the entire challenge a massive test of raw power. She's about to say more, connecting this very fact to the recent chaos happening at Vinchen's private building. The scene shifts, recapping the last few insane days at Vinchen's place. We see Vincen shirtless, his torso covered in a web of glowing mana loops, as he forces his body through the dangerous new flow technique. The shot pans over to show Vincen meditating without a shirt, while Revan and Julian watch on, confirming that Revan is now officially living in Vincen's outbuilding. Revan is in full-on coach mode, pushing Vincen to complete another perfect mana loop. Julian frets from the sidelines, nervously pleading with him to take it slow. A close-up shot of a manual reveals the ridiculously coded instructions they're trying to follow. Revan's face goes beet red as he deciphers the text from a trashy-looking romance novel, realizing Vincen is actually planning to use the book's bizarre methods to awaken the Dwarf King's blessing traits. Revan stammers, asking if Vincen is for real about training him this way. Vincen agrees, but only if the book's wild claims turn out to be true. Vincen lays out the insane risks involved. He'll have to guide Revan's mana flow personally while they meditate side by side, essentially putting Revan's life entirely in his hands. He looks Revan dead in the eye, reminding him of the oath he swore, and confirming he's ready to trust him completely. Watching Vincen meditate with such intensity, Revan wonders if he could ever place that kind of absolute faith in another person. He knows he couldn't. Revan is humbled yet again, feeling Vincen is on a whole other level. But he admits to himself that this kind of defeat actually feels good. Revan marvels at Vincen's technique. This mana without imagery method is just pure insanity. Yet it's an incredible feat for someone from the direct family line. Vincen just silently pushes through the agony, sweat dripping down his body as the mana swirls violently. Julian screams at Vincen to stop improvising and lower the flow, reminding him that using Revan's trait was his plan. To begin with, Julian rips into him for being so reckless, comparing his actions to doing gymnastics on the edge of a cliff. Even Revan warns Vincen that he's pushing way too hard and needs to slow down, which just makes Julian yell that he told him so. But Vincen remembers his past life as Davin. He's always had to risk it all to get ahead, knowing that nothing worth having comes without danger. As the mana rages, the narration reinforces this. Sometimes you have to walk through fire and push forward no matter the cost. Julian panics, certain Vincen is about to die, as the chaotic mana loops tighten around him. Vincen strains, focusing on one last connection, believing that if he can just link this final piece, the entire flow will stabilize. The streams of power collide violently inside his chest. As he forces the final connection, Julian screams that it's way too soon and lunges toward him. The last strands of blue and pink mana snap perfectly into place. Vincen not only survives, but a triumphant laugh escapes his lips, overjoyed that he pulled it off. But a split second later, a surge of raw red energy corrupts the entire circuit, causing the mana flow to rupture. The unstable power explodes outward, demolishing a huge section of the building. Revan throws up his arms to shield himself from flying debris as the room is annihilated. Battered and bruised, Revan struggles to his feet amidst the wreckage. Meanwhile, Vincen's stepmother calmly confirms with the Patriarch that roughly half a year is left before the next Crimson Fortress admissions open. She adds that Vincen has in fact already defeated a second-level threat, a star martial artist, making the fortress look like nothing more than a simple gate he has to pass through. Back in the wreckage of the room, Revan frantically calls out to Vincen, who, pinned beneath a pile of debris, weakly replies that he's okay. Revan is freaking out, telling him he's pushing way too hard, pointing out that a process that took Revan 6 months should take even a prodigy like Vincen at least 2. But across the estate in the audience chamber, Vincen's stepmother makes a sudden cold declaration. Vincen gets 1 month and not a day more. The Patriarch commands her to deliver this new ultimatum personally, locking in a brutal timeline for his training. Vincen gets a stark reminder he has exactly 1 month to defeat the Crimson Demon, and he's chewed out for not paying attention. As he comes to under a mountain of fallen books, Vincen thinks to himself that he almost bit the dust, and would have had to go through the whole reincarnation hassle all over again. Footsteps echo down the mansion corridor. The Grand Chamberlain is here with an order from the Lord. Young Lord Vincen is to complete his coming-of-age trial within the month. She warns that the clock is ticking, and he needs to get a move on. She throws open the door to the demolished room calling his name, but stops dead in her tracks, completely stunned by the scene. Stepping into the disaster zone, she finds a shirtless, bandaged Vincent surrounded by his attendants and a sea of scattered books. A dark aura, practically radiating off her, the Grand Chamberlain demands the young lord explain this utter chaos. While Revan is internally panicking, recognizing the terrifying 7-star powerhouse Realsa Vincent just casually claims he was just meditating. But Sari immediately screams that he is so obviously lying. She furiously argues that no meditation session on Earth would leave him looking this wrecked, and asks if he's ever going to stop making her worry, forcing a quick apology out of him. Watching Vincent's respectfully chill attitude, Realsa mentally notes how his way of treating people is a night and day difference from the former lord. She says she won't press him on it, since he said not to worry, but she has something way more important to discuss. Realsa gets straight to the point. Whatever his meditation was, he needs to wrap it up because the head of the house sent a direct message. She repeats the order with chilling finality. He must complete the trial in just 1 month. Vincent processes this. Knowing his father has never put a timer on him before, he realizes this command means something huge has shifted. A pleased smirk spreads across his face as he concludes that his old man finally has some expectations for him. Realsa then drops another bomb for the next month. She will be his personal protector, shadowing his every move. She urges him to give it everything he's got, practically begging him to crush the Crimson Demon. Revan starts spiraling, knowing Vincent needs at least 2 months just to get the Dwarf King's blessing. A 1-month timeline doesn't just seem hard, it sounds totally impossible. Vincent agrees that with only a month left, he's got to speed things up. But he's cut off by someone calling his name. Sari, her voice thick with emotion, pleads with him not to burn himself out. Vincent just smiles and promises not to go overboard, but then he suddenly feels it. An almost invisible aura flares up around Sari, and he realizes she's leaking raw mana. It clicks for him, then Sari is sitting on an insane amount of mana. She makes him promise again to be careful, and he agrees, then asks her to give him and Revan some privacy. The door clicks shut, leaving the 3 of them alone. A month isn't enough, Vincent thinks. He needs a different strategy. His friends anxiously look to him, asking what the new game plan is. Glowing patterns of mana ignite across Vincent's torso as he begins to form a mana circuit. He shows them the fully formed, intricate design and asks Revan to double-check his work. Revan and the other attendant just stare jaws on the floor at how unbelievably fast Vincent completed the mana flow. Vincent explains he brute forced the flow into completion, a shortcut that will let him reach manifestation way ahead of schedule. Revan is internally geeking out over Vincent's sheer talent, while their companion can only stammer in total disbelief. Vincent declares with absolute confidence that they won't need the whole month. He's not just going to meet his father's expectations, he's going to shatter them. Fast forward 2 weeks. Vincent, Revan, and their armored friend stand in a clearing deep in the forest, braced for what comes next. Vincent announces it's time to start manifesting his traits. His knight companion visibly stiffens his nerves on edge. Revan is also watching with wide eyes, half expecting another massive explosion like last time. Vincent warns Revan that another blast is a real possibility and tells him to get back, but the knight flat out refuses to budge, insisting he has to be there to witness Vincent's success firsthand. Vincent just smiles, thinking to himself that this guy's loyalty is the real deal. He activates the circuit and the manifestation begins. The mana pattern on his body erupts in a blinding light, which then collapses into a super dense core of pure power. The energies swirl, shifting colors as the trait begins to take a physical form. Rings of pure blazing light materialize, heralding the birth of something incredible. Revan feels a bizarre sensation in the air, as an immense power begins to coalesce around Vincent. From that energy, a colossal ghostly figure begins to take shape. An absolutely massive spectral dwarf king in full armor looms into existence above them, leaving Revan completely speechless. The overwhelming presence of the dwarf king, with its glowing eyes and massive hammer, dominates the clearing. Terrified, but also hyped, Revan nervously greets the entity, wondering if he's the only one who can see this living god. The Dwarf King hoists his hammer high, channeling his immense power. With a motion that splits the air, he smashes it down, unleashing the blessing. A piercing scream rips from Revan's throat, while Vincent just stands there perfectly still, as the divine energy cascades over them. A colossal pillar of pure gold light swallows the entire group. In the blinding flash, a phantom figure in familiar clothes flickers into view, a ghost of a memory from a place he once called home. Vincent's eyes widen instantly, recognizing the absolutely overwhelming power that is now flooding his entire being. He stares at the glowing sigil materializing before him, and it all clicks into place. He knows exactly what this is. The knight explains that this mark is the legendary Dwarf King's Blessing, the first-tier defensive trait known as Body Strengthening, just 1 rank below the God-tier Steelman level. The knight is absolutely floored, thinking to himself that Vincent somehow snagged the Dwarf King's personal buff without even needing the full month of prep time. The king's spectral form hovers over the canopy, watching them. Revan internally grumbles for the king to just bounce now that the power-up has been delivered. Vincent feels the new power coursing through him. He's sure now he can crush that master swordsman's servant and has built the foundation to finally defeat the Crimson Demon. He turns to Revan to thank him for everything, but the knight cuts him off, telling him to save the gratitude for after the demon is dead. Vincent says he's got one more favor to ask, and you can see it gets the knight's attention. 2 days later, a carriage is rolling out under a cloudless sky. Dressed to the nines and armed with his sword, Vincent declares that it's go time. They're heading for the Crimson Demon's den. As he approaches the carriage, he apologizes to Ryelza for the last-minute summons, explaining that he plans on completely shattering his father's expectations. But Ryelza is worried, pointing out that he's bailing on the last 2 weeks of his training. Is he really going to be ready? As they get ready to leave, Vincent asks her what's really bothering her, which gets her to finally open up about all the past rites she's witnessed. Ryelza remembers standing guard for the Lord, for Vincent's own brothers, and every other Adenka heir during their trials, noting that not a single one has ever failed. She makes it clear that Savannah's son will not be the first one to take an L, and begs him not to walk into this with some dumb, reckless confidence. Vincent just reassures her, saying there's nothing she needs to worry about. The carriage rumbles on deep into the forest, making its way to their final destination. Inside, Vincent and Revan sit across from Ryelza, who's watching them like a hawk. During the ride, Revan starts complaining, griping that bringing a guardian along on this mission is totally pointless, but Vincent points out that she's also there to monitor his every move and to secure the loot after they kill the demon. Revan still can't wrap his head around why Vincent is being so extra about this whole thing, just to prove a point, and thinks about how much the world has changed in 500 years. Ryelza suddenly breaks the silence, asking Vincent if he's done any research on the Crimson Demon. She explains that, to take this thing down, you typically need at least 3-star mana, and from her expert opinion, Vincent is nowhere near that level yet. It dawns on Revan that Vincent never once asked for any intel on the demon, but Vincent just brushes off the concern, and wonders aloud if their ancestor Arslan somehow planned even this moment. Then Vincent confidently reveals that the Crimson Demon was the very first monster he ever took down, so he feels zero need to study up on it. Ryelza warns him that even with his weirdly OP swordsmanship, he can't afford to let his guard down for a second. She admits she knows she's a bit of a downer, but concedes that maybe she's just being paranoid. Vincent asks her why she's going so hard to help him, and she gives a stuffy official reply about being the guardian and proctor of the trial. He bluntly calls her out for embezzling funds from the trial's budget, asking if she honestly thought she could get away with it. As the carriage keeps rolling, Vincent admits he knows he was lacking before, and he just can't shake that feeling, basically hinting that he gets why she did it. He even suggests that maybe she intentionally left herself exposed for him to find out, a way to give them some common ground. Ryelza just sits there in a heavy, tense silence, not knowing what to say. Vincent tells her it's fine if she doesn't want to talk about it, and suggests they just call it even, since she never grilled him about his unorthodox training. Outside, a horse whinnies as the carriage finally pulls to a stop. Vincent tells Ryelza, "We're here," and she nods. They step out of the carriage onto the earth, scanning the ancient, crumbling ruins around them. Vincent begins to say something about the place. Ryelza cuts in, explaining that these ruins are called the Old Temple, and they serve as the Crimson Demon's nest. She then adds that the site is actually a memorial for the first patriarch Arslan, built after he killed a fragment of the archdemon Davin. Vincent notes that Arslan's name keeps popping up and feels in his gut that none of this, not Arslan, not the Crimson Demon, is a coincidence. Ryelza's hand falls to the hilt of her sword, bracing for what's about to happen. She announces, "I will begin preparations." Pouring mana into her sword, Ryelza raises the glowing blade high and summons an incredible wave of energy. The power erupts toward the heavens, kicking off the activation of a massive wide-range spell. A gigantic mana dome materializes around the ruins, sealing off the entire battlefield. Vincent and Revan look up, realizing she's just trapped them all inside. A lone crimson eye snaps open in the darkness, and from the shadows behind a pillar, a monstrous crimson demon lurches into view. It locks onto Vincent and his crew, letting out a ferocious roar as raw power crackles around it, its eyes blazing like hellfire. Vincent just tells Ryelza, "Yo, keep your eyes peeled," as he steps up, ready to put on a show. Drawing a seriously ornate blade, he tells her to soak in every detail and report it all back to the Adenka family, because they're about to see what a legend looks like. With a demonic screech, the Crimson Beast charges its massive scythe, slicing through the air. The battle is on. The demon hefts its colossal scythe high above its head, preparing a strike that could shatter the very ground they stand on. Ryelza screams for Vincent to dodge and use the sword path, but he's already calculated the odds, reasoning that getting inside the swing of a huge weapon is the ultimate power move. Vincent plants his foot, a smirk playing on his lips. In a blur of motion, he closes the distance, and the shriek of his sword clashing with the demon's scythe rings out. He throws his weight into it, forcing the massive weapon from side to side. The demon is visibly shocked that this tiny human had the guts to charge straight in. With expert precision, Vincent locks the scythe shaft with his blade, dead stopping its momentum. Grinning like a wolf, he tells the beast, "Don't even think about trying to swing that thing again." In a flash, he uses his blade and the locked momentum to unleash a devastating counterattack. The force of the blow sends the demon staggering backward. He thinks to himself, "Called it. Getting in close against a big weapon is always the right play." Raelza just watches her mind blown. This is his first real fight, and he's only 14, yet he's executing this high-level strategy like he was born for it. She can't shake the feeling that he fights like a seasoned veteran, someone who has put down this exact crimson demon countless times before. Vincent knows it's the Dwarf King trait that's letting his untrained body pull off these insane maneuvers. He reflects that every skill he's acquired until now has just been the groundwork for discovering the true ultimate sword path of his swordsmanship. The crimson demon stumbles back, completely stunned as Vincent relentlessly presses his attack. Vincent executes a perfect backflip, creating distance just as a burst of energy explodes from the spot he just struck. He slides into a ready stance, declaring, "It's time to switch things up." This is the perfect moment to pull back and change his approach. He analyzes his opponent, noting that crimson demons are pure aggression, and this one is getting seriously ticked off from being on the defensive. He predicts the demon is about to unleash a massive, desperate attack. An attack so huge it's guaranteed to leave it wide open for a counter. As the demon starts powering up its attack, he thinks, an enemy full of openings like this, finding a sword path will be a piece of cake. Vincent resolves to use his body strengthening trait to absorb the insane backlash from the sword skill he's about to use. He activates his swordsmanship, combining it with body strengthening, and a glowing pattern flares to life in his eye. A colossal arc of sword energy cleaves through the demon's attack, completely overwhelming it. Bathed in a crimson aura, Vincent follows through with absolute lethal precision. The crimson demon's body literally bursts apart, releasing a glowing, pulsating red core. The core clatters across the stone floor toward Vincent as the demon's physical form dissolves into dust. Vincent turns proudly to Raelza, asking if she got a good look at how he just dominated that crimson demon. But Raelza is just frozen, stunned into a terrified silence. A horrifying thought crosses her mind. Does Vincent really not know the most critical fact about this monster? Raelza's memory flashes to the intel. A crimson demon can never be defeated with just one attack. Her eyes lock on the glowing core. The real reason is that these demons have more than a single life. It resurrects from its core, giving it 2 full health bars. Just as Vincent turns his back, a reborn, absolutely enraged crimson demon swings a flaming scythe at him. Raelza screams a desperate warning to the young lord as the second life demon attacks, her eyes widening in pure terror at the sudden ambush. The revived crimson demon unleashes a massive fiery scythe slash, and Vincent barely manages to avoid being sliced in two. Vincent's only thought is that even this revival is playing out exactly like it did 500 years ago. He can see the flaming edge of the scythe just inches from his face. The scythe slams into the ground where he just stood, shattering the stone. Even Vincent is shocked by the demon's insane new speed. After coming back to life, he notices its more muscular, monstrous new look, and realizes the crimson demon's entire appearance has transformed. He wonders if these creatures actually evolved over the past 500 years. Raelza shouts that a revived crimson demon goes into a berserk state, gaining a massive boost in both speed and power. The demon immediately proves her right by launching a huge wave of fire at Vincent. Vincent dives straight through the demon's destructive blast, rolling into a perfect landing. He finally recognizes just how screwed he is. Seeing the exit is now blocked by rubble, Vincent has no choice but to face the supercharged demon head-on. The crimson demon unleashes a furious storm of attacks, its scythe tearing through the temple. Vincent grits his teeth, straining to block each blow, as his allies scream his name in a panic. But Vincent spots something happening over at the temple's barrier. Julian is screaming at him to change tactics, but Vincent yells back that they have to make the demon drop its guard first. He's figured it out. The demon is trying to corner them too. It's setting them up for one final ultimate attack. He decides to spring his own trap the very instant the demon commits to that final strike. Beyond the shimmering barrier, Raelza's gaze is fixed on Vincent's desperate struggle against the crimson demon, her mind screaming about her duty as the right's supervisor. But she knows stepping in means the young lord automatically fails, so Raelza sends a silent, desperate prayer to Savannah. "Don't make me be the one to destroy your son's future." The name Lady Savannah echoes in Vincent's mind. He can almost hear Savannah's voice, praising his raw power, telling him his talent was being completely wasted in this place. The memory shifts, spiraling into Raelza's own past. A flashback to the day Savannah found a starving, scrappy thief, Raelza, and invited her to join their legendary quest. Raelza's voiceover kicks in, explaining how meeting this absolute force of nature, this woman who actually wanted her as a companion, felt completely insane, totally unreal. She remembers Savannah's blinding smile as she introduced herself. Savannah casually glances back, making sure Khan and Versa are cool with Raelza joining the squad. They just shrug, knowing Savannah would have dragged her along no matter what they said. Raelza thinks back, wondering if she was just delirious from her injuries or simply done with a life of stealing scraps. Or maybe she muses she was just completely captivated by Savannah's fearless energy and reached out to shake her hand. And just like that, Raelza concludes she joined the party destined to become Adenka's greatest heroes. The memory shifts again. A monstrous ogre towers over Raelza. The beast lets out a deafening roar as Raelza calmly squares up, ready for battle. With a quiet apology, she prepares to draw her blade. Her hair ignites with power as she unleashes her aura, but it's Savannah who suddenly flips through the air, slicing the ogre down, while yelling that she's totally not the main character. She lands, celebrating the epic finishing blow and giving Raelza props for the perfect setup. With another fluid motion, Savannah demolishes a second beast with her insane sword skills. Raelza remembers being in awe of how Savannah was, both devastatingly powerful and stunningly beautiful. Conquest complete, Savannah cheers, and Raelza recalls her uncanny ability to make everyone around her smile. Raelza reflects on how Savannah became a blazing sun in her formerly dark and hopeless world, a faint smile gracing her lips at the thought. "My lady Savannah," she whispers to herself with reverence. The scene dissolves into a stormy night rain, lashing against a huge mansion. Inside, Savannah is on her deathbed. Her knuckles are white as she clutches the bedsheets. Weeping servants Raelza and the Lord are gathered around, their faces etched with grief. Raelza's voice cracks as she whispers Savannah's name, a swaddled infant clutched in her arms. The baby Vincen lets out a piercing wail. The image of the crying infant fills her vision, snapping her out of her sorrow. Raelza's expression hardens. This is no time for grieving. Savannah's child needs her. Tears streaming down her face, she makes a solemn vow to protect this boy from the brutal fate of Adenka's direct bloodline until he could stand on his own as a true warrior. Back to the present, a massive boom echoes across the right grounds. Vincen is sprawled on the floor, his sister sneering down at him like he's trash. As he lies there defeated, she taunts him, calling him a useless disappointment and demanding he address her with the proper respect. Vincen grits his teeth and formally calls her sister. She just lets out a cruel laugh, mocking him for being so pathetic that he'd obey her instantly. Raelza's voiceover returns, admitting that for 14 years she kept wondering what, if anything, she could expect from this supposed failure, Vincen. She confesses she even thought about ditching Adenka for good. Cut to another scene where Wilson is fanboying outside a door, gushing about how awesome Vincen is. A terrifying shadow falls over him. It's Raelza who instantly shuts down his ridiculous fangirling. Wilson panics, stammering that he was just doing his duty as a servant to young Lord Vincen. It's then that Raelza hears the news. The patriarch himself has officially acknowledged Vincen. The revelation hits her like a lightning bolt. For the first time in over a decade, she feels a flicker of genuine hope, silently begging Vincen not to give up now. Her spirit cries out to him. The scene snaps back to the arena, where the Crimson Demon is gathering a terrifying amount of energy for what looks like a final devastating blow against Vincen. Raelza's inner voice screams, refusing to let it end like this. Just as the demon lunges forward, a new voice commands it to halt. Vincen pushes himself to his feet, a new fire in his eyes. The entire battlefield begins to glow with an intense crimson light as he focuses his power. Vincen gives a subtle signal, and a new player enters the game. He calls out to Revan, who explodes past Raelza and into the arena like a bullet. Raelza is stunned, realizing that the blur that just shot past her had to be Revan. Revan's lightning-charged blade smashes against the demon's weapon in a shower of sparks. And there they are, Vincen and Revan, standing side by side, having perfectly intercepted the demon's charge. With his dramatic entrance complete, Revan plants his feet, shouting his own name for all to hear, ready for a brawl. The supercharged Revan then clashes ferociously with the Crimson Demon. Watching them fight in perfect sync, Raelza realizes with a gasp that Revan Adenka must have planned to jump in and help Vincen all along. To take down the demon together, Revan flashes a grin at Vincen, telling him to wrap this up before he runs out of steam. Vincen brings his hands to his center, channeling energy for another technique. The scene flashes to him, meditating calmly in the pouring rain. A shimmering blue aura envelops him, and Raelza can't believe her eyes. He chose to start meditating in the middle of this life-or-death chaos. She knows that if Revan's defense breaks for even a split second, the shockwave alone will instantly kill the young lord. The Crimson Demon locks onto the meditating Vincen, seeing an easy target. But Revan immediately taunts the beast, yelling that its fight is with him now. He tightens his grip on the hilt of his colossal cleaver. Revan continues to exchange savage, earth-shaking blows with the Crimson Demon. The monster's face twists into a mask of pure rage. It unleashes another apocalyptic wave of fire and fury. Revan just smirks, declaring that, since the demon survived Vincen, it was now officially his prey. Activating his Steelman ability, Revan meets the demon's overhead slam with his own glowing blade, mocking the monster for being way weaker than he looked. Sparks fly as steel clashes against steel, painting the air with a frenzy of crimson streaks. It hits Raven a second too late. A normal blade could never survive the sheer force of the Steelman effect. He watches in horror as spiderweb cracks race across his weapon. The Crimson Demon just smirks. Its entire game plan was to shatter Raven's sword all along. With a sickening crack, Raven's cleaver explodes into 1,000 pieces. He spits a curse now, completely disarmed, as the demon lunges for another attack. Despair washes over him. He can no longer protect Vincent. As the demon's scythe arcs down, Raven throws his bare hands up to block it. Straining with every fiber of his being, Raven barely holds the massive blade at bay. Raw terror floods his eyes as the immense pressure begins to crush him. Screaming Vincent's name, Raven lets out a desperate plea for help. A calm voice inside Vincent's head acknowledges his companion's sacrifice. A blur of red and blue energy, Vincent's sword aura zips through the air, narrowly missing Raven as it rockets toward its target. In a flash, Vincent appears behind Raven, trapping the demon in a whirlwind of his signature swordsmanship. The attack exposes the monster's glowing crimson core. The swirling vortex of energy intensifies. Cracks splinter across the glowing orb, until finally it completely implodes under the assault. Vincent and Raven watch as the demon's power evaporates into nothingness. "Thanks, Raven," Vincent breathes. Raven cracks a joke. "I almost feel kinda bad for the guy." Raelza approaches, asking if this whole insane strategy was Vincent's master plan. From the very beginning, she asks. She congratulates him, but adds a warning. The Lord might not approve of you getting help from an outsider. She reminds him of his vow to shatter his father's expectations. Vincent just laughs it off, saying Raelza is being way too extra. He breaks it down, explaining that the mana barrier was specifically built to only permit one monster inside at any given time. And since we just iced the first one, he warns that means another creature is clear to cross the barrier. He tells them to get ready because a second monster is about to drop into the arena. Vincent then clarifies that the whole last battle was just to test Raven's resolve. And now he declares, "It's my turn to prove myself." With that, Vincent bites down hard on the miracle stone. An eruption of terrifying purple aura engulfs him as the stone's raw power floods his system. He quickly assesses his boosted strength. Even powered up, he can only unleash his ultimate sword technique 2 times. Vincent explains that's why he was meditating. He needed to get a precise read on how the miracle stone was affecting his body. He takes a deep breath, bracing himself for the backlash. Forcing his body to endure the unimaginable strain, Vincent unleashes his signature swordsmanship once more in a colossal vertical slash. He's noticed a fatal flaw. The demon's core is left wide open every single time it regenerates. Seeing this massive vulnerability, he knows the thing is a sitting duck. Vincent considers the regenerating demon an easy mark. He decides to take the most direct path straight to that glowing, exposed core. Vincent's twofold sword technique slices cleanly through the revealed crimson weak point. The shattered pieces of the core drift down like confetti in front of a stunned Raelza. She realizes she'd been stressing out for absolutely no reason. Raelza can only stare in awe at Vincent's incredible performance as the demon's remains disintegrate. Completely gassed, Vincent collapses to his knees, struggling to breathe. He wonders what kind of insane swordsmanship this even is, knowing that, without his special trait, the meditation and the miracle stone, the power would have annihilated him. He tells Julian to just let him pass out if it comes to it, assuring him Raelza will keep them safe and that true victory belongs to whoever is left standing in the end. Even on the edge of collapse, Vincent vows he will not fall. "Young lord," Raelza calls out, her voice filled with a newfound respect. At that moment, the entire barrier around the temple flares with a blindingly powerful light. A gigantic summoning circle materializes in the sky above the ruins as the barrier itself shifts and warps. Raven stares up in alarm, wondering what in the world is happening. Julian and the barely conscious Vincent are just as confused, but Raelza instantly recognizes the phenomenon. A summoning circle. She's in total shock because this was never mentioned in any of the historical records of the rite. Stones begin to float, crackling with raw lightning. Something massive materializes right before their eyes. A rocky core flares to life inside a stone shell, forming a colossal stone creature. Raelza knows what it is. An ancient relic guardian emerges and unleashes a deafening roar. Raelza quickly figures that a guardian of this magnitude must have been created alongside the temple itself. She boldly steps forward, declaring, "I am Raelza Beldion, servant of the current Adenka," she demands the guardian reveal its mission to the direct bloodline. The guardian's only response is another monstrous, earth-shaking roar. Realizing it's too ancient to comprehend her words, Raelza orders Raven to grab Vincent and fall back. Raven and Julian hastily drag Vincent away as Raelza screams for them to hurry. Raelza now stands alone, facing the advancing stone behemoth. She enters her stance, activating the 7th chapter of Belladonna swordsmanship. A colossal wall of ice erupts from the earth, shielding the others as debris rains down. Raven and Julian look back, their faces masks of sheer disbelief. They scream Raelza's name as they witness the towering stone guardian collapse, completely frozen solid. The guardian's entire lower body is encased in a glacier. a testament to her insane power. She then commands the northern winds. A massive torrent of energy shaped like an ice dragon slams into the Guardian, cracks race across the frozen giant, and then Raelza herself bursts upward through the ice. She delivers the finishing blow with her sword. Vincent, barely hanging on, looks up, recognizing that absolute overwhelming power. Raelza erupts with a blast of ice, and Vincent immediately clocks her power as some next-level 7th star heat. Vincent is propping up a completely drained Revan who rasps out, "It's not over." Revan, drenched in sweat and barely hanging on, points a trembling finger into the gloom. Without warning, Revan whips his sword around, launching a colossal purple energy wave at that exact spot. The blast detonates against the monument, right behind Raelza, making her jump out of her skin. The squad rushes to Revan's side, demanding to know what he's thinking. Raelza is baffled. Why did he just randomly attack the wall? Then it clicks, he was sending her a signal. She spots something squirming from the wreckage and whispers, "What is that?" And then Raelza sees it, a tiny creature crawling into the open. This is the Guardian's true form. Her blood turns to ice. The real monster just escaped, and the young lords are its next target. The Guardian lets out a blood-curdling screech as it lunges. In a flash, Raelza activates her Milky Way Wanderer, blessing her sword frosting over as she poises on her snow steps. She rockets forward, skating on platforms of pure ice. In the Guardian's eyes, Raelza is a terrifying black shadow, closing in for the kill. Just as it's about to maul, Vincent Raelza's blade flashes, cleaving the creature clean in two. With the danger gone, Raelza checks on Revan and the crew while Julian just gawks at her insane speed. She admits she totally whiffed on sensing the Guardian's real form. Guessing the ancient ruins' magic threw her off. Raelza gives Vincent major props for spotting the danger and giving her the heads up. That's when Vincent directs her attention to something else. Vincent points to a frozen pedestal holding a chest, figuring that must have been what the Guardian was protecting. The scene cuts the tension, finally breaking as peace settles over the surrounding woods. Raelza steps up to open the chest while the others watch from a distance. They call out asking what's inside. Raelza peers in and her eyes go wide. She pulls out a dragon bone, identifying it as a sacred relic left behind by the first patriarch Arslan himself. Julian and Vincent instantly know what they're looking at. A dragon bone is a legendary, priceless ingredient for any magic user. They realize this was the whole point of Arslan's brutal rite of passage. In a stunning move, Raelza kneels and respectfully presents the dragon bone to Vincent. She declares that out of the entire Aiden clan, he was the one who uncovered it, so by all rights, the prize belongs to him. Vincent frets that a relic this powerful should be turned over to the family through the church, but Raelza shuts that down, insisting she'll take the heat for any consequences. But Vincent has a different idea. He draws his sword, and with a single perfect strike, splits the dragon bone cleanly in half, holding one piece out. He looks her dead in the eye, and declares her his accomplice in this secret. He's straight up, there's no way he could have gotten this relic without her. So he offers her one half. Raelza is floored, gratefully accepting the gift. The scene fades, shifting to a grim graveyard of swords, marked by a single imposing blade. This is the tomb of Aiden's patriarch, a cemetery where countless swords serve as headstones. And there, standing among the blades, is the current patriarch. Raelza steps forward to report that Vincent has officially completed his rite of passage. The patriarch states that the event needs to be logged with the church, but Raelza tells him what she saw was way beyond a standard report. Now he's intrigued, telling her to spill the tea. Raelza lays it all out, how a hostile Revan risked his own life under Vincent's command, and how Vincent aced the demon subjugation mission. The patriarch dismisses it at first, figuring Vincent just got by on some cheap tricks. Raelza continues, explaining how Vincent later soloed another Crimson Demon, all on his own, which shocks the patriarch silent. Then she tells him, Vincent discovered the legendary dragon bone relic, and then split half of it with her. The patriarch is stunned that Vincent would just give away a treasure like that, and Raelza confirms Vincent sliced it himself. The patriarch gets a grave look on his face and tells Raelza she missed the most critical detail of the whole story, leaving her completely confused. He then commands her to try and break her piece of the dragon bone, making it clear this is a direct order. Cornered, she agrees. Raelza focuses and blasts the bone with a powerful surge of magic. They both stare dumbfounded as the bone remains utterly unscratched. Muttering an apology to her ancestors, Raelza decides to go all out, summoning the full power of the northern winds for her strongest ice attack. A gigantic pillar of ice crashes down on the dragon bone. It's encased in a frozen tomb, but when the ice shatters, the bone is still in one piece. It doesn't have a single crack. Raelza is shook. She used everything she had. That's when the patriarch explains the terrifying truth. He says only a master blacksmith with legendary tools could ever hope to damage that bone. The implication hits them like a ton of bricks. The patriarch looks up, silently speaking to his own father's memory. He reflects that his own reign as patriarch might be ending soon, concluding that Vincent wields a power beyond comprehension. The patriarch orders Raelza to watch over him. Later alone, he proudly acknowledges Vincent as his true son. Back at the mansion, Wilson comes crashing in, bawling his eyes out, screaming for the young lord. Sari immediately tells Wilson to shut it, reminding him that Vincent needs to be resting. After the brutal subjugation, Wilson frantically asks Vincent if he really has to leave for the deadly Crimson Fortress. He wails that the place is a death trap, swarming with terrifying monsters and master warriors. Sari can't help but clown on Wilson for being so scared, especially given his own rough past. Vincent cuts them off, telling Julian to focus on the mana swirling around Sari. He reveals that he can literally see the flow of energy coming off Sari's body, which absolutely blows Julian's mind. Vincent thinks to himself that he's seen a mana flow just like it, 500 years in the past, and he wonders if it's connected to the same old secret. He suddenly turns to Sari and asks for her family name. The question catches her completely off guard. Sari reluctantly admits she's from the fallen Hazeli family, confirming Vincent's wild theory on the spot. So get this, she has the legendary magic body. Vincent drops a bombshell on Julian, explaining how the Heisleys literally pioneered the study of mana's fusion with the human form. We get a sick flashback of a god-tier mage activating the magic body skill, basically turning his own flesh and bone into a pure mana conduit. Vincent lays it all out. As long as the magic body exists, the heavenly exoskeleton can never truly be destroyed. He presses Wilson and Sari, asking if any Heisley elders are still kicking around. With a heavy heart, Sari reveals that her grandmother, the last Heisley she ever knew, is already gone. Vincent immediately softens, apologizing for digging up old wounds and giving her props for everything she powered through during his trials. Julian's just baffled, wondering how a family with such OP skills got totally wrecked. Vincent's gut tells him the shady Samion family is behind it all. He figures they had to wipe the Heisleys off the map to keep the very existence of the heavenly exoskeleton a secret. That's when Sari remembers hearing about another Heisley relative, one who died a long time ago. And Julian drops the biggest plot twist yet. That relative was Savannah, Vincent's own mother. The revelation hits Vincent like a truck. His mom was a Heisley. Suddenly it all clicks into place. That's why her name is forbidden. Sari confirms it, saying the Lord banned any mention of Savannah because it just brings him a world of pain. We see the patriarch lost in thought, remembering Savannah, with a storm of conflicting emotions. Wilson chimes in, remembering Lady Savannah as someone who hired people without a shred of prejudice, taking in refugees from fallen families just like them. He paints a picture of how Savannah personally welcomed a broke and desperate Raelza into the Adinka estate. Vincent and Julian are floored, swelling with pride, realizing their mother was an absolute legend and that Raelza's fierce loyalty was born from that kindness. Just then, a sharp knock echoes at the door. It's Raelza calling for the young lord. She's about to announce that Lord Revan is taking off. And there he is, Revan, standing outside the manor, making it official that he's leaving. Vincent has to confirm it. You're really dipping. Revan nods, saying he can't stick around after the whole Crimson Demon fiasco. But he admits he has one final favor to ask. Vincent tells him to name his price. It turns out Vincent wants Revan to dig into the Heisley family's ancient history, from like 5 centuries ago, suspecting someone messed with the official records. They share a light-hearted moment, joking that it's like excavating some old-school romance novel, but both agree something vital must have survived in the family's side branches. Revan accepts the mission, sealing the deal with a solid handshake. As they grip hands, Vincent tells him they'll cross paths again, promising he'll be on a whole new level by then. With a final nod, Revan turns and walks away as Raelza and Vincent watch him go. A little later, Vincent confronts Raelza, asking if her kindness is just about paying back a debt to his mother. But then he flips the script, asking for a favor, not as Savannah's son, but as Vincent Adinka. With dead serious eyes, Vincent asks Raelza to train him, to push him to his absolute limit, until he ships out for the Crimson Fortress. He makes it clear this isn't a master-student thing based on his name. This is one warrior asking another for help. In her mind, Raelza sends a silent prayer to Savannah, asking if it's okay to shift her life's devotion entirely to Vincent. A memory of Savannah's warm smile flashes in her mind, and Raelza apologizes for her doubt, committing to a promise she can no longer make to her old master. I accept, Raelza declares, her voice steel. But I'm not holding back. Vincent's eyes ignite with determination. I'm counting on it, he tells her. And so it begins inside the Adinka training hall. Raelza breaks it down to master a trait without a visual guide. He has to get his hands on a mana circuit that already has it. She's down to teach him, but as a warrior, he has to earn that power. She calls him out. Why aren't you using the sword from your ceremony? She explains that the holy sword, Black Moon, will only answer to him when he proves he's worthy. She lays down the terms of their deal if Vincent can land even a single scratch on her. Within the next 5 months, the trait is his. She practically dares him. Come on, show me that freaky sword style of yours. Vincent hesitates for a second, the image of Revan's permanent scar flashing in his mind. But Raelza gives him no time to think, lunging forward with chilling speed. "Do I remind you of him?" she whispers, her blade a hair's breadth from his face. Vincent snaps to attention, feeling the raw power of her trait explode around them. He pictures that dark, shadowy figure from before and braces himself for the counterattack. Vincent unleashes his own devastating sword art in a brutal response, but Ryelza just smirks. She knows that move's power, and she has zero intention of giving him the chance to pull it off. It hits him. She was aiming for his eye. This isn't just training. This is a legit life-or-death battle. Ryelza just shrugs. "We can always get Priest Dylan to patch you up," confirming she's going all out, no mercy. She reminds him with a terrifyingly cheerful smile. "I told you I wasn't going to go easy on you." A week flies by. Every night they clash under the moonlight. Ryelza's attacks are a blizzard of complex icy strikes, and Vincent is barely managing to survive the onslaught. He channels everything he has into one more desperate slash. Too slow, Ryelza scoffs before utterly crushing him with a colossal ice storm. The blast is so massive it pulverizes the arena floor. "That's enough for tonight," she says, ending the session as Vincent lies broken and gasping for air on the shattered ground. "You're getting better, though," she offers before heading off to find Sari and Wilson. She glances down at her own sword, noticing the blade is about to snap. She's been going through swords like crazy lately. She mutters that she's gotta go, chew out the blacksmith. As the rhythmic clang of a hammer echoes from a nearby forge, Ryelza pushes through the door and lays eyes on the dwarven smith Hansen hard at work. Relsa's voice drops dead serious, warning him that she's lost far more than just her master title, and that it would be an absolute catastrophe if he's been supplying defective weapons to House Adenka. Hansen snaps back, introducing himself while visibly offended by the accusation. He sarcastically calls Relsa Savannah's little shadow before glancing over at the new guy, wondering who he is. In the dead of night, Relsa appears with a heavy sack telling Hansen he needs to inspect what's inside. With a crash, she dumps a heap of shattered swords onto the floor. Relsa explains, these are the blades she utterly destroyed in just 1 week of sparring. She calls them pathetically flimsy. Hansen agrees to take a look, but as he examines the breaks, he immediately feels like something is seriously off about the damage. He starts grilling Relsa, asking what kind of monsters she's been fighting, running down a list of seriously dangerous beasts, elite martial artists, and high-level mages. She shoots down every single one, even admitting she hasn't crossed blades with another great sword lately. Finally, she drops the bomb. She's only been sparring against Vincent's great sword, Crimson Lotus. Hansen is completely floored that the notoriously weak 7th Young Lord is the one wielding the legendary Crimson Lotus. Later on, Relsa drags Hansen all the way to the estate where a very sleepy Julian asks why she dragged them out so late. Relsa just apologizes, explaining that Hansen absolutely insisted on seeing Crimson Lotus for himself. The pieces instantly click into place for Julian, as he realizes Hansen is the one who forged Crimson Lotus. With a proud smirk, Hansen confirms he's the blacksmith, who created the masterpiece, boasting about his legendary skills. At the same time, Ben Shin and Julian all remember Hansen's story, a once celebrated master smith and friend of the family who basically fell off the map. They recall how Hansen ditched crafting legendary swords to mass-produce solid everyday weapons, losing all his street cred among blacksmiths for chasing money. But Vincent sees him as a total legend, for prioritizing practical weapons that allow normal people to actually protect themselves. We get a quick flashback that shows a group of adventurers surviving a monster attack thanks to Hansen's blades, proving he valued saving lives over his own fame. Vincent politely introduces himself to Hansen as the 7th Young Lord, saying it's a genuine pleasure to meet him. Hansen just scoffs at being called a master. Then he completely loses it, bursting into laughter and teasing Vincent for the fake flattery. He asks if this makes them even for waking him up. Vincent, cool as ever, tells Hansen he wasn't trying to diss him. In another flashback, a voice tells Hansen that the path he's chosen in life is the correct one. A mysterious cloaked man warns Hansen he'll be clowned on for his choice, but readies himself to show his support. Raising his drink, the man says he truly believes Hansen's decision is the right one. Back in the present, this memory makes Hansen look at Vincent with genuine surprise and interest. Seeing Vincent's unshakable composure reminds Hansen that this kind of raw conviction seems to run deep in Vincent's family. Hansen admits the rumors about Vincent being ugly were dead wrong, which Vincent just takes as a compliment. Then Hansen demands to inspect the sword Crimson Lotus, and Vincent agrees without hesitation, handing it over. Hansen pulls the blade from its sheath, studying it intensely, and then his jaw hits the floor. Stunned, Hansen asks if this is the very sword that slayed the Crimson Demon and fought Savannah's warrior. Vincent confirms it. The confirmation hits Hansen like a ton of bricks. He examines the blade again, seeing that it's completely flawless. That's when it dawns on him. Vincent has to be cutting with his own raw power, not just relying on the sword's sharpness. Fascinated, Hansen insists on seeing exactly what kind of swordsmanship Vincent is packing. When Vincent hesitates, Hansen immediately calls him out for trying to dodge a fight when he's carrying a legendary weapon like the Crimson Lotus. Julian quickly warns Vincent that he's already used both charges of his swordsmanship skill, but Vincent knows he can't blow this opportunity to learn from a real master. Just then, Sari appears out of nowhere behind Hansen, sternly calling his name. She goes off on Hansen for making a racket when people are trying to sleep, and he just stammers out a weak excuse. Watching them, Vincent figures out that Hansen used to donate to poor kids, and Sari was one of the children he helped. It's clear that Hansen and Sari now have a kind of father-daughter relationship. Sari pouts about Hansen, causing drama at her workplace until he promises he'll come back another day. That's when Vincent offers to visit Hansen's forge tomorrow, along with Sari, which makes Hansen's face light up. As Hansen leaves, he desperately yells that they absolutely have to bring Sari along, and Vincent can't help but notice how much the old man dotes on her. Watching them, Vincent realizes where Sari gets her warmth from. It comes from being raised by someone as caring as Hansen. The next morning arrives at Hansen's forge. Inside the workshop, Vincent gets ready and starts gathering a massive amount of energy around the Crimson Lotus. He then unleashes an insanely powerful crossing, putting his technique on full display. Sari and Hansen just watch their minds completely blown by the pure destruction. Hansen thinks Vincent's sword style is weird as hell, but it also reminds him of the legendary techniques of the hero, king, and the great demon. He concludes that Vincent is 100% worthy of the Crimson Lotus. The kid's skill is the real deal. Vincent asks if that little demo was good enough for him. Hansen admits that Vincent has definitely caught his interest, so much so that he's seriously tempted to forge him a brand new sword. Shocked, Vincent repeats that Hansen would actually forge a sword, just for him. Hansen says there's only one thing missing before he can do it, making Vincent ask what the catch is. Hansen reveals he's had a vision of an ultimate sword for years, but he's missing a super rare material, and Vincent immediately offers to buy it for him. Hansen waves off the pouch of gold, insisting that the core component he needs is priceless, it can't be bought. Julian's eyes widen as he realizes what the master blacksmith is talking about. A legendary mastodon horn. A heavy silence hangs in the air as Vincent and Julian process this bombshell. Then the camera pans to a glimmering, impossibly rare mastodon horn. Without a word, Vincent presents the horn to the blacksmith, his voice steady as he asks if this will be enough to forge the blade. Hansen is utterly floored. The old master erupts, shouting in sheer disbelief that he's looking at the genuine article. Vincent quickly clamps a hand over his mouth, hissing that only his father and Raelson knew this relic even existed. Stunned, Hansen just lets out a wild laugh, convinced that their meeting was nothing short of fate. He's all in. He will forge the sword. But then Vincent throws him a curveball, asking if the horn can be fused directly into his current blade, the Crimson Lotus. Not a new weapon, but an evolution. Hansen is skeptical at first, but Vincent explains his reasoning. The Crimson Lotus is a link to his father's legacy, a part of his own journey. He's grown attached to it. This raw sentiment wins Hansen over completely. He agrees to merge the horn's power with the Crimson Lotus, and tells them to come back in 3 weeks. 3 weeks pass. Vincent, Sari, and Julian return to the forge, but they are greeted by a scene of absolute chaos that stops them dead in their tracks. Hansen's entire workshop is a raging inferno. The realization hits Vincent like a punch to the gut. The forge itself is being devoured by the blaze. The trio can only stare horrified at the roaring tower of fire, where the workshop once stood. The whole structure is consumed by flames. Sari starts to panic, crying out for Hansen, but Vincent snaps at her to keep it together. Vincent knows Sari doesn't usually lose her cool like this. Something has gone catastrophically wrong inside that forge. With cold resolve, Vincent declares they have to save Master Hansen. Julian desperately tries to stop him, yelling about the danger of running into a collapsing inferno. But Vincent is already calculating. He trusts his sword technique to slice through any obstacle, planning to carve a path straight through the door and the wall of fire. It's too reckless, Julian screams, as Vincent begins to channel his power. A brilliant aura explodes around him, his eyes glowing with fierce intensity. He unleashes everything in a single, devastating swing. The attack rips a hole through the burning entrance, and without a second's hesitation, Vincent dives headfirst into the firestorm. Inside the suffocating heat, Julian spots a figure on the floor and points. They've found him. It's Hansen. He's critically injured, sprawled unconscious on the ground. Vincent hoists him up, trying to shake him awake, but the old master is completely out. Brother Julian cries out, his voice cracking with shock. His eyes lock onto a blinding golden light pulsating within the flames. Could that be the Crimson Lotus? The sheer amount of mana erupting from it is insane. Julian realizes the power of the dragon skeleton. It was exponentially greater than anything Hansen could have ever predicted. Vincent makes the call. Getting Hansen out is their only priority. Hauling the blacksmith over his shoulder, Vincent sprints through the blazing hellscape, his mind reeling from how badly this has all gone wrong. But their path is gone. The exit is completely sealed off by a wall of collapsing debris and fire. Julian shouts that the flames will consume them if they just stand there. You have to do something, he pleads. Then a sudden thought strikes him. He asks Vinchen if he has any defensive skills. Vinchen grits his teeth, reasoning that even flames born from a dragon skeleton can't burn forever. They just have to endure it. He confirms he has a defensive blade technique that might just get them through this alive. Julian has no choice but to trust him. Vinchen centers himself, his identity fracturing for a moment. He is Vinchen Denka, but he is also Daven Samyeon, the legendary swordsman. He reaches deep within and calls upon the ancient power, Samyeon Swordsmanship, Chapter 1. A memory flashes Daven Samyeon himself executing a technique called Breaker amidst a storm of pure energy. The narrator's voice explains his blade is soft, flexible enough to shatter steel. His mana itself bends to his will. The vision shows him striking not at the fire itself, but at the very flow of the heat and energy moving towards him. This is the Gentle Steel Breaker, Chapter 1, The Blade of Silence. Julian watches absolutely mesmerized by the display. He knows this isn't just some imitation. This is the true Samyeon swordsmanship. He stares at his brother, wondering, who are you really? Above them, the burning ceiling groans, ready to collapse. As Vinchen's technique neutralizes the inferno around them, he gasps for air, drained but alive. They made it. Julian and the still unconscious Hansen are standing in the scorched but now safe ruin of the workshop. Hansen lets out a low groan. As his eyes flutter open, they both rush to his side, asking if he's okay. Hansen, still completely dazed, ignores their questions. He stares at Vinchen, his voice raspy, as he demands to know how he can use the Samyeon swordsmanship. Vinchen just cracks a joke, saying that if Hansen is spouting nonsense like that, he must be fine. Internally, though, he's sweating, realizing his secret isn't so secret anymore. Shaking his head, Hansen dismisses it as a dream and changes the subject. The camera focuses on the reforged Crimson Lotus. It's finished glowing with an otherworldly brilliance. Hansen confesses he'd never worked with Dragon Skeleton before. He never imagined its mana would just spontaneously combust with such violent force. Vinchen reaches out and takes hold of his new blade. The moment he lifts it, a radiant energy explodes from him. He can feel the sword humming, resonating with his very soul, as if acknowledging him as its master. A raw, untamed power vibrates from its core. Seeing the look on Vinchen's face, Hansen asks if he doesn't like it. It's incredible, Vinchen breathes. But Julian senses something is off about this whole situation. Vinchen asks him what's wrong. Julian lays it out. If Patriarch Arslan was the one who set all of this in motion, then he must have known exactly how volatile the dragon skeleton would be. He planned for this disaster. Julian connects the dots. The reforged Crimson Lotus was nothing more than a trial run. But then Vinchen hits Hansen with a surprise request: forge another brand new sword. Hansen immediately assumes Vinchen's not satisfied with the Crimson Lotus, but that's not it. Vinchen clarifies that with Hansen's fresh experience, the next blade will be an absolute masterpiece, though Hansen just groans at the thought of all the grinding and cleanup. Hansen gripes that he's completely out of Dragon Skeleton, certain he'll never see that much of the legendary material again. Vinchen and Julian just trade these sly, all-knowing smirks. A massive, shimmering chunk of rare material flashes on screen, hinting they've got a plan. Just then, Ryelza strolls into the forge. She slams a second piece of Dragon Skeleton right onto the table, casually explaining she heard he needed it. Hansen's jaw drops. He absolutely loses it, screaming in disbelief at being handed another freaking Dragon Skeleton. Ryelza instantly shushes him, warning that this is a top-secret artifact, known only to the head of the family. Hansen is blown away by the insane generosity, but Ryelza makes it clear this isn't for him, it's 100% for the young master. A fire ignites in Hansen's eyes. He declares he's going to forge the ultimate Dragon Skeleton sword, even if it takes him a lifetime. As she walks away, Ryelza reflects on a time she'd completely lost faith in Vinchen. But now she has to admit it. She is utterly floored by how much the kid has grown, how much he's matured. Suddenly, a voice calls out from behind, apologizing to her. It's Vinchen. He approaches, admitting he wanted to show her his progress, but ended up taking that opportunity back, and now he doesn't know how to make it up to her. Ryelza tells him the Dragon Skeleton was paid for in full 14 years ago. She explains that watching him be born, and now seeing him prove himself as an elite martial artist, is the only payment she ever needed. Vinchen promises she's about to be even more blown away as he unsheathes the Crimson Lotus. He remembers a key insight from his battle with the Crimson Demon. He'd figured out a strategy to defeat Ryelza, even with her being a 7-star martial artist. Fueled by this confidence, Vinchen declares that today he will surpass her and finally understand her abilities. A chilling aura erupts around Ryelza. She warns him again she's not holding back. Their battle ignites, blasting the arena with a blinding white light. A tidal wave of energy rips through the hall as their powers collide, unleashing a colossal surge of freezing power. Vinchen buckles under the raw force of Ryelza's ice assault. Gritting his teeth, Vinchen growls that it's not over yet. Ryelza dives from above, unleashing a devastating, downward slash. She mocks him, reminding him of his big talk about winning, when he's clearly nowhere close to victory. Ryelza brings her blade crashing down in a spectacular ice-infused strike, as Vinchen braces for the impact below. A massive explosion erupts, shaking the very foundations of the arena. Their swords scream against each other as Vincent desperately fights to hold his ground. Vincent lets out a primal roar, forcing her back with the Crimson Lotus. Raelza is stunned. He actually blocked an attack powered by the mana of 4 stars. She stares in disbelief, realizing that neither of their swords has a single scratch, despite channeling an immense amount of mana that should have instantly shattered both blades. Raelza dives in for another attack, completely oblivious to the trap Vincent is laying. Vincent vaults into the air and unleashes a towering purple arc of energy that catches even Raelza off guard. She instantly recognizes that the flow and raw power of this new attack are on a whole different level from anything he's shown before. She's left wondering what insane new power the reforged Crimson Lotus is hiding. The narrator reveals that thanks to the Dwarf King's trait, the Crimson Lotus now absorbs kinetic energy. It will never break again. Vincent realizes the sword can mimic its wielder's traits, and this new shock absorption ability is its latest evolution. Back in the arena, Raelza has to admit that the Crimson Lotus has seriously leveled up. Vincent gives all the credit to Hansen's incredible craftsmanship. Hearing this, she decides it's time to stop playing nice. Raelza accelerates, and Vincent completely loses track of her. She's just vanished from his sight. A split second later, she reappears directly behind him at unbelievable speed. She becomes a blur, circling him inside a vortex of swirling frost as she prepares her next assault. Vincent forces himself to stay calm. He decides to ignore her insane speed and instead focus on reading the mana she's gathering to pinpoint her movements. He swings with a shout, baiting her to come to him. Raelza materializes a smirk on her face as she says, "Wrong," and prepares to counter. Vincent agrees that he was wrong, but not how she thinks. He tightens his grip, channeling the sword's impact-absorbing power. Vincent springs his trap, coordinating with his past self's abilities, so that while Raelza attacks his front, the real strike is aimed at her back. Raelza is completely shocked that this kid can now block her attacks with his bare hands and has already learned to read her movements. After only a single month, he unleashes a devastating technique, double sword strike variation. The scene cuts to Chapter 1, titled Dwarf King. It flashes back to the boy wielding a blazing hammer, his twin sword assault, detonates the ground all around Raelza. The shockwaves and explosions absolutely shred the arena. Raelza notes that he's already fired off both of his special moves, but she's completely stunned by the totally unexpected result. Raelza stands there totally unfazed as his own sword clatters to the ground. The cold dread washes over him. He's been disarmed. Without a word, Raelza just kicks his blade back to him. "Pick it up," she commands. But he refuses, not about to take a win handed to him on a silver platter. He demands a legit fight. Raelza just stares him down, her eyes dissecting this unexpected display of pride. She scoffs, calling his honor nothing but pure arrogance, and warns him that a real enemy would have finished him right there. Raelza breaks it down for him. The truly powerful won't give a damn about his honor. They'll show zero mercy. "And don't you ever forget it," she says, as a colossal frosty aura explodes from her entire body. Utterly crushed by her sheer power, the kid can only stammer that he gets it now, his mind reeling from her insane energy. Raelza just warns him to get ready. She's done playing games. Stomping her foot, she channels an immense wave of power that surges through her very being. In a flash, Raelza rockets toward him, ready to end it, but mid-lunge she pulls up short. Something feels off. He's not there. He's suddenly right beside her, one hand clamping down on her arm, stopping her cold. With his other hand, he gently taps her forehead. Tag. A cocky smile spreads across his face. He points out he just landed a hit on her during her ultimate power-up, and this is months before their big mission to the Crimson Fortress. Raelza is absolutely stunned. How she breathes. "Not even your twin blades could get past my defense." He explains that he didn't aim for her. Instead, he sliced right through the protective veil of mana wrapped around her. Drawing on the Dwarf King's power, Raelza is speechless. He completely neutralized her core ability just by severing her mana connection. A slow smile forms on her face. She's impressed, admitting he always finds a way to blow her mind. He just grins and asks for that reward she promised. Pushing herself up, Raelza agrees to spill the beans. She starts to reveal the secret of her blessing. She describes it as a pure flow of energy from a being called the Galaxy Wanderer, and as she speaks, a glowing cosmic sigil materializes between her hands. Flash forward to a study where Raelza and the blonde spirit are watching our guy meditate, drawing that very same sigil into his own body. Raelza is shook. He's already mastered the basic energy circuit in just 2 days. She tells him that to truly manifest the power he has, to let the mana flow through that pathway naturally. We see him shirtless and deep in concentration, carefully guiding the Galaxy Wanderer's cosmic energy around his abdomen. The Wanderer's symbol materializes in the air before him, glowing with an intense light as his own mana compresses around it. His blonde friend is totally bugging out, praying that this insane power surge doesn't literally blow a hole in the ceiling. Suddenly, his eyes fly open. He feels something epic emerging from the mana. Behind him, a ghostly woman, woven from starlight, begins to take form. It's the Galaxy Wanderer herself. The narrator's voice kicks in, painting a picture of the remote Crimson Fortress, the stage for their next brutal showdown. Deep inside the fortress, Dean Vargas is chewing out Headmaster Herka for blowing off her documents. She just complains that a fighter has no business being buried in paperwork. He lays